Checkpoint Juliet 7. That's what the sign said. Just that. No district name, no county marker, no road number that matched anything on the maps we actually used. Just Juliet 7, stenciled in faded yellow paint on a concrete barrier that had been cracked since before I got posted here, and nobody ever fixed it because nobody ever came out here to look. I'm going to try to explain what happened in some kind of order. I'm going to try. But I keep starting things, and then my brain goes somewhere else, and I end up 3 days ahead of myself, and then I have to backtrack, so bear with me. If you're listening to this, and I don't know if anyone is, I genuinely don't know if this radio is reaching anything other than static, and the occasional burst of what I think is a weather station that went automated somewhere to the northwest. But if you're listening, just know that I'm trying to give you the clearest picture I can. My name is Owen Pratt, badge number 4471. I was a posted officer at Checkpoint Juliet 7 on Highway 9 Bravo, which is the jungle access road that runs between the city of Talang and the northern logging districts. It's not a busy road. On a good day, we might see 40 vehicles. On a slow day, which was most days, it was more like 15. We checked commercial trucks for contraband, checked logging licenses, checked for animals being transported illegally, did the occasional breathalyzer. It was not exciting work. I had asked for this posting specifically because I did not want exciting work anymore. And for 14 months, it had delivered exactly what I asked for. There were 4 of us at the checkpoint normally. Me, my partner Dale Hutchins, and 2 rotation guys who came in on alternating weeks. Sergeant Ferris, who was pushing 50 and didn't talk much, and a younger officer named Connolly, who talked too much to compensate. The week this happened, Ferris was on rotation, so it was just me and Dale and Ferris, 3 guys at a jungle checkpoint, Tuesday morning, and the air already so thick with humidity that your shirt was damp before you'd been outside 2 minutes. I remember the specific quality of that morning. Bird call from somewhere in the canopy to the east. I couldn't tell you what kind of bird. I'd never bothered learning. And the low drone of insects that was so constant you stopped hearing it after a while. It just became the silence underneath everything else. The road was empty, had been empty since 6:30, when a palm oil truck went through heading north. I was on my second cup of coffee, which I'd made in the checkpoint's tiny back room on a hot plate that only worked if you tilted it slightly to the left. And I was reading something on my phone. I don't even remember what. Some article, something pointless. And Dale was outside leaning on the barrier, doing the thing he always did when it was slow, which was narrate the birds. "That one's a kingfisher," Dale said through the open door. "Hear that? Fast trill, 3 notes. Kingfisher." "You said that one yesterday was a kingfisher," I said. "It probably was. They like this stretch of road." "How would you even know what a kingfisher sounds like?" "Bought a book," Dale said. 2 years ago. Bird identification. Thought I'd learned something useful out here." This was the thing about Dale. He just quietly did things like that. Bought a bird book. Learned the names of every species that came through the forest near the checkpoint. Never made a big deal about it. Just sat there with his cup of coffee and identified kingfishers while I read garbage on my phone. I don't know why I'm telling you this. It's not relevant to the survival stuff. But when I try to remember what happened, I keep coming back to that morning in Dale and the kingfisher, because it was the last normal thing. And I guess I need to get through it before I can get to the rest. So, it was around 9:15. I know the time, because I just checked my phone to see if my data connection was working. It wasn't. It kept dropping out, which wasn't unusual out here. We were at the edge of coverage, and I put my phone down and finished my coffee and went outside to stand with Dale, because the back room was too warm and the door let a cross breeze through. And then we heard vehicles. Not one vehicle, multiple, coming from the south, from the Talang direction. That was the first thing. The sound of several engines at once, which didn't happen on this road. You got your single trucks, your occasional small convoys of logging company vehicles, but you didn't get what this sounded like, which was a bunch of cars all accelerating at the same time, not in any coordinated way, just fast, coming fast. Dale stood up straight. I felt it too, that shift in attention, the thing your body does when it recognizes something is off, before your brain catches up. The first vehicle came around the bend, and I saw immediately it was a private car, a white sedan, moving at probably 80 kilometers per hour on a road where the legal limit was 50 because of the curves. Both rear windows were broken, not smashed from inside. Something had hit them from outside. The driver didn't slow down. He saw the barrier. We had it down, across the road, the standard position. And he slowed only when he had no choice. And when he stopped the car, I saw his face through the windshield. He was white as a sheet. Like genuinely, literally, the color of paper. His hands were shaking on the wheel. I walked to his window. Dale stayed near the barrier, hand near his radio. The driver was a man maybe mid-40s, wearing a business shirt that was sweat-soaked through. He had a cut above his eyebrow. He was speaking before I even reached his window, speaking quickly in a mix of Malay and English that I had to concentrate to follow. "You have to open it," he said. "You have to open the gate. There are people. There are things. On the road. I can't. Please. The gate. Sir. Slow down." There's no time to slow down. He actually shouted it. Not aggressive. Scared. Like a man who had decided that social norms were no longer something he had bandwidth for. "Please. Just open the gate. I'll tell you everything. But you have to let me through." More cars behind him now. I could see them stacking up around the bend. 4 or 5 vehicles, all of them going too fast, all of them stopping now because the barrier was down. Dale was already on his radio. "Juliet 7 to dispatch. We have a situation developing on 9 Bravo. Multiple civilian vehicles coming from Talang direction at speed. Requesting." He paused. Listened. Keyed his radio again. "Juliet 7 to dispatch. Do you copy?" Nothing. He looked at me across the hood of the white sedan. I held up one finger, back to the driver. "What happened in Talang? What are you running from?" He grabbed my wrist through the window. I let him because he wasn't being aggressive. He was just desperate. And I could feel his hand shaking. "People were attacking people," he said. "On Jalan Merdeka, a man he was eating someone. In the street. And others. There were others doing the same thing. And they were not. They did not seem right. Something was wrong with their eyes." I heard Ferris coming out of the back room behind me. "What's going on?" "Stay there," I said. And I didn't mean it as an order, but it came out like one. The driver let go of my wrist. He was looking in his rearview mirror at the cars behind him, and then he said, very quietly, "There are more of them coming down the road, behind those cars. A lot of them. Walking. And they're fast." I walked back to Dale. The cars behind the sedan were starting to honk. People getting out of their vehicles. I could see panic on their faces even from 30 meters away. A woman was crying near a red pickup truck. A man had a child over his shoulder, the child's face pressed against his neck. "I can't raise dispatch," Dale said, "or district, or anyone. Try Juliet 6. He tried. White noise. I looked down the road toward Talang. The road disappeared around a curve about 300 meters south. Beyond the curve, silence. But it was the wrong kind of silence. The birds had stopped. The insects were still going. That constant drone. But the bird call had just stopped. Like something had scared them. "Open the barrier," I said. "We're supposed to." "Open the barrier, Dale." He opened it. Cars began moving through. People on foot too now. Some of them coming through the tree line from the sides of the road, rather than from the road itself, which made no sense. Which meant they had come through the jungle to avoid whatever was on the road. I started counting. 1 family, 2. A man alone with a bag. A group of young people who looked like university students. Someone who had a head wound badly bandaged with what looked like a shirt torn into strips. Someone limping. So many people limping. Ferris was helping them, directing them off the road onto the shoulder, trying to create order. I stayed at the barrier because I needed to see what was coming around that bend. I heard it before I saw it. It's hard to describe what the sound was. It was partly a crowd sound, the noise of many people moving, feet on asphalt. But it was wrong in a way I couldn't pin down immediately. The rhythm was off. Normal crowds have a pattern. Conversations, footfalls, the occasional shout. but this was more homogeneous. One continuous sound. And underneath it, something else. Something I had no word for at the time. Something that I've since decided sounds most like the sound a sick dog makes when it's past the point of barking. Just this low, continuous vocalization that isn't quite a groan and isn't quite a scream. They came around the bend. There were maybe 40 of them in the first wave, more behind. They were moving at different speeds, some walking, some sort of shambling at what was almost a jog, the movement uneven, nothing like normal walking, no arm swing, no head movement, just forward, forward, forward. And even from 300 meters I could see that something was wrong with their mouths. They were all open. All of their mouths were open. Every single one of them. I said, "Dale." He was already looking. "Get everyone through the barrier," I said. "Right now. Get everyone through and then we're getting in the truck." He started moving. I watched the crowd coming down the road. One of them had been a woman in a blue dress. I noticed the dress because it was the kind of thing you notice when your brain is trying to make sense of what it's seeing. She was walking, shambling, that rolling lurching gait, and her head was tilted to the left at an angle that necks don't normally do, and she was making that sound. "Owen," Dale's voice, right behind me. "I hear you." "Owen, we need to go. Ferris is still." "Ferris!" Dale shouted past me. "Ferris, get in the truck!" Ferris was helping a limping man, had him by the arm, was moving him toward the barrier. He looked back at Dale and then looked at the road south, and his face did something complicated. He handed the limping man off to someone else, someone in the crowd of refugees, and he started moving toward the truck. He didn't make it. I've gone back to this moment so many times, whether there was something I could have done differently, whether if I'd moved 5 seconds sooner, if I'd called out sooner, if I'd had the barrier open before the crowd arrived instead of after, I don't know. I've stopped trying to calculate it because the numbers don't change. The first of them reached the barrier. I'd left it open. They came straight through. They didn't speed up at the sight of the barrier or slow down. They didn't respond to it at all. And the closest one to Ferris was a man in work clothes, a logging uniform, I think, and he moved at Ferris from behind, and I shouted, and Dale shouted, and Ferris turned, and the man got his arm and went down with Ferris, and then there were 3, 4 of them on him, and I was already pulling Dale toward the truck. I don't like this part. I'll tell it fast. We got in the truck. I was in the driver's seat. Dale was reaching back for his rifle from the rear rack. The truck started on the first turn of the key, which I was grateful for in a mindless animal way. Grateful the way you're grateful that air exists. I put it in reverse, and then in drive, and went north on 9 Bravo, behind the last of the civilian vehicles, and the last thing I saw in the mirror was Ferris's hand above the crowd of them, moving, which meant he was still alive. I did not go back. I have told this to myself many times, and I still haven't found the framing that makes it okay. We drove north for about 4 kilometers before the shock really hit me. Dale was in the passenger seat with his rifle across his knees, and he'd taken his radio off his belt and was trying to reach dispatch on the truck's radio unit now, the one with more power, and the static from the speakers filled the cab, and I was driving, and my hands were shaking, and I kept checking the mirror. Nothing behind us. The refugees had scattered. Some had driven north with us. Some had gone into the trees. Some I didn't know what had happened to. "Dispatch. This is Officer Pratt with the Northern Checkpoint. Badge 4471. Come in." No response. Static. "Juliet 7 to anyone on this channel. We have a situation. We need police or military response on 9 Bravo. Anyone copy?" Hiss of static. Dale had his jaw tight, the way he got when he was holding something. He tried a different channel. Same nothing. "How bad was it?" he said, not looking at me, looking at the road. "Bad. How many?" 40 in the first group. More behind. He nodded slowly. "And Ferris?" "I don't know." Another nod. He already knew. There were several vehicles ahead of us on the road, the overflow of refugees from the checkpoint, and a few had pulled off at a wide spot in the road, about 2 kilometers on from the checkpoint, where there was a fuel resale stand. Just a little wooden structure with jerry cans and a hand-painted sign, and people were just stopped there, standing beside their cars, not knowing where to go. Which was a problem I understood because I didn't know where to go either. I pulled over. 3 families, 2 unaccompanied men, a woman with a teenage daughter, 12 people total, standing on a jungle road in the middle of nowhere, looking at the police truck like it was going to tell them something. The thing about being a cop is that people look at you for decisions, even when you're just as lost as they are. The uniform does something, the vehicle does something, and suddenly you're the person who is supposed to know. I had been a cop for 9 years, and I had learned, slowly and not without pain, that the correct response to this is to look like you know even when you don't, because panic in the person who's supposed to know makes everything worse. So I got out of the truck, and I stood there, and I said, calmly, "Okay, everyone stay together. We're going back to the checkpoint." A man in the group, heavy set, maybe 50, wearing the kind of polo shirt that said middle management somewhere, looked at me like I was crazy. "Back there? The checkpoint has concrete barriers, a lockable room, and a vehicle bay with enough space for everyone here. The structures are solid. It's 2 kilometers back, and whatever was coming from Talang, most of it should have followed the people who ran north, not stopped at the checkpoint." This was partly true, and partly me making it up, but it was the best logic I had. "What if they're still there?" someone else said. "Then we assess and adjust. But standing on an open road is worse." We went back. The checkpoint was in worse shape than I'd left it, but not in the worst shape I'd feared. There were 4 of them wandering on the road near the barrier. I say wandering, but what they were actually doing was moving in slow, aimless circles, the way they do when there's nothing specific drawing them, just this persistent forward motion that keeps turning because there's no direction to commit to. One of them was in the checkpoint's vehicle bay. I could see it through the open bay door from 100 meters away. Dale looked at me. 4 on the road, I said. 1 in the bay. Ferris's rifle is in the bay too if it wasn't taken. We're going to shoot them? I had not yet used the word. I want to be precise about this. I don't know what I thought they were at that point. I knew they were people who were wrong in some fundamental way. People who had become a different kind of dangerous. I had watched Ferris go down. I had watched the woman in the blue dress with her neck at the wrong angle. But I hadn't yet said the word. Hadn't yet made the internal arrangement that let me think about what I was about to do. "We're going to clear the area," I said. "Yes." I used my service pistol. The civilian group stayed in the truck. Dale flanked right with his rifle. It took about 3 minutes. I'll skip the specifics. The one in the bay was the hardest because it was in a confined space, and I had to go in after it. And the fear in that moment was not like normal fear. It was this cold, flat thing that narrowed everything down to footsteps and distance and angles. But we cleared it. Then we started getting the civilians settled. The checkpoint was not a big structure. The main building was concrete block, about 12 by 8 meters, with the processing room at the front, and the back room that had our hot plate and a bathroom and a small storage area. The vehicle bay was open on one side, but we had a roll-down metal door that we pulled closed. There was a second outbuilding about 15 meters from the main block, a covered concrete pad that we'd used for secondary vehicle inspections, with a partial wall on the north side. We moved everyone into the main building. Concrete walls, 1 door, 2 windows, both with the original steel mesh screens that had been there since before my posting and had never been replaced. We pulled the vehicle in under the vehicle bay roll-down and locked it. I took stock of what we had. Food, our checkpoint rations, which were never generous. 2 packs of instant noodles, a box of crackers, some canned sardines, a jar of instant coffee, and whatever the civilians had brought with them in their cars. That turned out to be a bag of chips, some water bottles, a few apples, half a tin of cookies, and some prepared food in containers that someone had clearly packed from their house in a hurry. Water. We had the checkpoint's water tank, which was a 200-liter poly tank fed by a roof collection system. I checked the level, about 3/4 full, for 14 people, me, Dale, and 12 civilians. That was okay for a few days if we were careful. Weapons, 2 service pistols, mine and Dale's patrol rifle, and a flare gun that had been in the bay since I arrived. and I'd never checked if it actually had flares. It did. 4 of them. First aid. The checkpoint kit, which was a bright red box with the standard contents. Bandages, gauze, antiseptic, a few pills. Nothing serious. Communications. The truck's radio unit was the best we had. I parked the truck close enough to the building that I could run a cable to an external antenna we had mounted on the checkpoint roof, which boosted range significantly. That night I sat in the truck with the radio, and I went through channels for 2 hours. I found voices occasionally. Fragments. Static torn. Sometimes clear enough to hear real words. A military channel that was transmitting but not responding to my calls. A civilian frequency, where someone was counting down numbers in a flat voice, which I later understood was an automated message on repeat. And once, maybe an hour in, a voice that was clearly a person, a real live person, speaking in English, saying something about a school, about a community, about going to a school. And then the signal dropped, and I couldn't find it again, no matter how I searched. Dale came out to the truck around midnight. He had 2 cups of coffee from the hot plate, both of them wrong. Too sweet, too weak. And he handed me one through the window and sat in the passenger seat. "Anyone?" he said. Fragments. Nothing confirmed. We drank bad coffee in silence for a while. The jungle was loud at night. I don't know if I'd ever really noticed how loud until that night when I was trying to listen. Insects in layers, dozens of different sounds. Frogs from the direction of the drainage ditch to the east. Something larger moving in the undergrowth to the north that turned out to be, I think, some kind of deer. The road was quiet. The barrier was down again. We'd marked the checkpoint lights off because light attracted things, and we were not sure what else was out on the road. "What do you think it is?" Dale said. "I don't know. Viral? Some kind of... I don't know, Dale. They're still people, right? I mean, they're not acting like people anymore." I said it straight. "Maybe there's something still in there. I don't know. But they're not acting like people." He turned his coffee cup in his hands. "Ferris might still be alive." I didn't say anything. "We should go back in the morning," he said. "Check." "Yeah," I said. "We should check." But I wasn't thinking about Ferris. I was thinking about what the driver of the white sedan had said. A man eating someone on Jalan Merdeka. Others. They did not seem right. Something wrong with their eyes. And I was thinking about the sound they made. That low, continuous sound. Because it was still going, distantly, from the south. You had to be very still and very quiet to hear it, but it was there. A sound like the road itself had developed a voice. I want to tell you about day 2 before I get into the next part, because day 2 is when I understood that the checkpoint was not going to be viable long term, and also when things got complicated in a way I wasn't expecting. I woke up on the floor of the processing room with my back aching and the smell of 14 people in a closed concrete space, already becoming its own kind of problem. 2 of the civilians had been sick overnight, not infected, just stress and bad food and dehydration, and one of the children was crying in the way children cry when they don't understand why things are wrong. A woman named Peggy had organized the others into something resembling order, without me asking her to. She'd rationed the water. She'd sorted the food. She'd designated a corner of the back room as the toilet area, with a bucket, because nobody wanted to go outside in the dark. She was maybe 60, gray-haired, with the kind of steady hands I associate with people who've worked in medicine. I found out later she'd been a nurse at a district clinic for 30 years before retiring. "How are you?" she said when I woke up, and she said it in the way nurses ask it. Not social ritual, actual question. Assessing. "Fine," I said, which was not entirely true, but was true enough. "Anyone hurt? Anyone?" I hesitated. "Anyone bitten? Scratched?" She understood what I was asking. Her face didn't change. "I checked everyone last night. Nothing visible. I'll check again today." "Thank you." "The young man," she said. "Over by the window. Robbie. He's a mechanic, apparently. He wants to talk to you about the vehicles." I looked. A young man, early 20s, sitting against the wall watching me. Lean, with grease-stained hands that were probably permanently that way. He had the calm eyes of someone who processed anxiety through doing things rather than talking about them. I went over. He straightened up. "There are 2 other vehicles out there," he said, without preamble. "Aside from the truck. Someone left a pickup at the far barrier. Keys in it. And there's a motorcycle on its side in the ditch about 50 meters north." "How do you know about the motorcycle?" "Saw it when we came back yesterday. The pickup I walked out and checked this morning." "You went outside?" "Just to the barrier. The road's clear." He said it matter-of-factly. "I can get the motorcycle running. It had a short in the kill switch from the fall, but it's nothing. I can bypass it. Be good to have a scout vehicle. Quieter than the truck." I looked at him for a moment. "How old are you?" 23. "You walked out there this morning alone without telling anyone." He met my eyes, not defiant, just even. I saw a gap and I moved through it. I can't sit still. I understood this completely. "Don't do it again without telling me first. Clear?" "Clear." "Good. Come with me." We did a perimeter check. The road was indeed clear. The infected that had passed through or gathered around the checkpoint the night before had moved on, following the sound of the civilian vehicles that had gone north. That was the first real observation I logged about their behavior. They followed sound. When there was no sound to follow, they drifted. When there was noise, they converged on it. This was important. This was the kind of thing that could keep you alive. The checkpoint sat in a natural clearing, where the tree line backed off about 40 meters from the road on both sides. The trees had been cut back when the checkpoint was built, and the undergrowth had come back but not tall enough to hide approach, which was good. We had sight lines. I got the pickup truck moved into the vehicle bay alongside the patrol truck. 2 vehicles now, plus the motorcycle once Robbie fixed it. The pickup was a beat-up thing with a cracked tailgate and half a tank of fuel, but it ran. The fuel situation was something I needed to think about seriously. The patrol truck had a full tank. I'd filled it 2 days before the outbreak, which now felt like a different geological era. The pickup had maybe half. The motorcycle, once running, would take maybe 3 liters to fill. The checkpoint had its own fuel reserve, a 50-liter drum of diesel in the bay, which was for the backup generator. I could not use that fuel for the vehicles because our vehicles ran on petrol and the drum was diesel. 50 liters of diesel I couldn't use was sitting right there, which was the kind of thing that would have been funny under different circumstances. There was a small provision shop, basically a convenience store, about 6 kilometers north on 9 Bravo. I'd stopped there before for drinks on slow afternoons. They sold packaged food, water, batteries, a bit of everything. I was fairly sure they'd have petrol too, because provision shops out here usually sold it in jerry cans, because the nearest actual fuel station was 30 kilometers further north. "We need to resupply," I told Dale that morning, standing outside the vehicle bay with the roll-down door open and the morning light coming in hot already. "Food and water first. There's a shop north, 6 kilometers. How many do we take?" "You and me. Leave the civilians here. Robbie stays to watch the door." Peggy had other thoughts. She came to the bay while we were gearing up. "You should take someone who knows how to treat wounds," she said. "You'd be more useful here. There's a girl in the group, teenager, 14. Her mother is one of the ones who was sick overnight. If I'm here and something happens to you on the road, what help am I? If I'm with you and someone gets hurt." She wasn't wrong. I looked at Dale. He shrugged slightly. "Fine," I said. "You come, but you stay in the truck." She nodded in that same, measured way. The road north was empty. That first drive north was eerie, in a way I found hard to categorize. The forest on both sides was completely as it had always been. Same canopy, same filtered light, same sounds. The truck's wheels rolling over the familiar patches and dips I knew from months of driving this stretch. Nothing had changed about the jungle. The jungle did not know anything had happened, and the road was just empty in a way that roads out here were sometimes empty, which made the whole thing feel almost like we'd imagined yesterday. We didn't say much. Peggy sat in the back and looked out the window. Dale rode with his rifle angled toward the passenger window, ready. The provision shop was a small structure of corrugated iron and painted wood, set back about 10 meters from the road, with a parking area of packed dirt in front. The shutters on the windows were closed. The door was closed. There was no car outside, but the door wasn't locked. When I tried it, it opened right away. I told Peggy and Dale to stay. I went in alone with my flashlight and my hand on my pistol. Inside, normal. Shelves, products. The quiet of a shop that had been closed up. I called out. Nothing. Checked the back storeroom. Nobody there. The shop owner, whoever they were, had left or was gone. I went back to the truck. It's clear. Let's move fast. We cleaned them out systematically. Canned goods first. And there were a lot, which I hadn't expected. A full shelf of tinned food, beans and sardines and lychees and corn, and some things I didn't recognize but didn't matter. Food is food. Then packaged dry goods, instant noodles, crackers, a big bag of rice. I found what I was looking for behind the counter. 6 5-liter jerry cans of petrol, all full. Water was harder. There were only a dozen small bottles in the fridge, plus some large containers, but we took all of it. Batteries, a hand crank flashlight, 2 pairs of work gloves, a box of matches. First aid items from behind the counter, a roll of duct tape, rope, a stack of plastic bags. It took maybe 15 minutes. We were working quickly, not panicked but efficient. Peggy came in despite what I'd said and helped carry things. And I didn't fight it because we needed the speed. We were loading the last of it into the truck when Dale made a sound. Not a word, just a sound. The specific sound of someone's breathing changing. I looked up. There was a man at the edge of the trees about 30 meters away, just standing there, watching us. He was not one of them. I could see that from the way he stood. He had his weight distributed normally, arms at his sides, head upright. He was tall, with a beard and a weathered look, wearing work clothes with mud on the knees. He was watching us carefully, not moving, like an animal assessing whether we were a threat. "Hey," I called. My hand went to my pistol, without me deciding to do it. He didn't move. "Come out from the trees," I said. "I'm police. We're not going to hurt you." He took a few steps forward onto the road. He was carrying something, a machete, at his side, not raised. He was looking at the truck, at the gear we'd loaded, at us. "How many?" he said. His voice was flat, not a question really. More like he was gathering information. "Enough," I said. "Where did you come from?" Long pause. He looked at the tree line behind him, and then back at us. "Logging camp. About 8 kilometers in, on the fire road." He paused. "Camp got hit last night. Most of them are gone." "Gone how?" He met my eyes for the first time. He had gray eyes, pale and steady. "Gone like what's on the road, like what came through the camp." "How many survivors from your camp?" He shrugged. "One shoulder. Just me as far as I know." I walked out. Been walking since 3 in the morning. His name was Garrett Aldrich, 41. He'd been working as a land surveyor with the logging operation. Not a logger himself, but contracted to survey the new concession areas. He knew the jungle road network better than anyone I'd met. He knew the fire roads, the ranger tracks, the seasonal paths. He carried the machete because he'd been using one for work for 20 years, and it was the first thing he grabbed when the camp fell apart. I took him back to the checkpoint. I thought about leaving him. I know that sounds cold, but I had 12 civilians already, limited supplies, and a man with a machete who I didn't know, and who had appeared from the jungle and wouldn't give me a straight story about what happened at his camp. I thought about it for maybe 30 seconds, and then I didn't leave him, because he was a person standing alone on an empty road with things in the trees, and leaving him there would have made me into someone I didn't want to be. Also, honestly, he knew the jungle, and I was already thinking we were going to have to go into it. Back at the checkpoint, we sorted the supplies. It was enough for maybe 5 days at good rations, maybe 8 if we stretched it. I wasn't happy with those numbers, but they were what they were. Around 2 in the afternoon, the radio in the truck picked up something clear. Not a fragment, not automated. A real voice, a man's voice, speaking in clipped, precise sentences. "This is Ranger Station 12 on Forestry Channel 3. To any emergency services or government personnel in the northern region. We have confirmed infected individuals on the highway south of our position. Our station is at grid reference." I had the handset in my hand so fast I nearly pulled the cable out. "Ranger Station 12. This is Officer Pratt, badge 4471, checkpoint Juliet 7 on 9 Bravo. I copy your transmission. Please say your grid reference again. Silence. Then, Officer Pratt, Ranger Station 12 copies. Grid reference is, it was about 22 kilometers from us. North and slightly east, off the main highway on a forestry track. A proper ranger station, with a generator, fortified storage, water well, and, according to the voice on the radio, who said his name was Nate Calloway, forest ranger, 28 years in service, enough stored supplies for 6 months for a 4-man team. He was alone there. His 2 colleagues had gone south to investigate reports before the radio went down and hadn't come back. The 4th ranger had been evacuated with a medical condition before the outbreak. Nate was alone at the station with his supplies and his radio and his very good knowledge of the forest grid. "How fast can you get here?" he asked. "I need to bring 14 civilians," I said. A pause. 14. Yes. Another pause. How many are compromised? None that we're aware of. We had everyone checked. You had them checked? What does that mean exactly? Visible inspection for wounds. No signs of infection in anyone's behavior. That's not. He stopped. Then, come north on 9 Bravo to the 40-kilometer marker. There's a fire road on the right, unmarked, brown post. Take that road east 8 kilometers to my station. Come in daylight. Do not travel this road at night. We'll move tomorrow morning, I said, first light. Copy that, I'll be monitoring this channel. I spent the rest of that afternoon preparing to move. Robbie had the motorcycle running. He'd bypassed the kill switch with a piece of wire from the checkpoint's electrical panel. Simple fix, the kind of thing you never think about. And we did a test run up the road, him on the bike, me in the truck following, making sure both vehicles were reliable before we committed to a 22-kilometer journey. The motorcycle was good. The truck was fine. The pickup I decided to leave because it was old, and I wasn't confident about it on a rough fire road. If it failed, we'd be worse off than with 2 solid vehicles. I was organizing the back of the truck, doing a proper inventory, when I found the notebook. It had been in the truck's glove compartment, underneath the vehicle manual and a box of road flares. Dale's notebook. I recognized it. He'd had it since before my posting. One of those small spiral-bound things. He used it to record bird sightings and nature observations. His hobby, his quiet thing. I stood there holding it and turned it over in my hands. He was outside with Garrett, the 2 of them talking. I could hear their voices but not the words. I put the notebook in my shirt pocket. That night, the second night at the checkpoint, was when things started getting strange. And I don't mean strange like zombies on the road strange. I mean strange in a different way. The kind of strange that makes you wonder about things you didn't know you didn't know. It was around 11. Garrett was on watch at the main door. He'd taken a watch shift without being asked, which I noted. And Dale and I were in the truck with the radio, going through channels like we'd been doing every night. Most of the civilians were asleep on the floor of the processing room. Robbie was awake, sitting near the window, which he said helped him think. We'd been on the radio for about 40 minutes when Dale picked up something on a channel I'd written off as static only. It was faint, barely there, and it took us a few minutes to understand what we were hearing. It was an automated broadcast, a loop, but embedded in the static, there were gaps, moments when the loop seemed to pause and someone was speaking over it, and what that someone was saying made no sense. I want to be precise about this, because I've told this part to people since, and they either don't believe me or they make too much of it, and I think the truth is somewhere in between, where you don't immediately understand it, and then later you do. The voice in the gaps between the automated broadcast was saying, in English, coordinates, just coordinates, latitude and longitude, read out in a flat, almost mechanical tone, and then a phrase, the same phrase, repeated each time, sector is active, do not approach, sector is active. That was it. I wrote down the coordinates. I checked them against the road map I had in the truck, an old paper map from the checkpoint supply, not detailed enough to tell me much, but enough. The coordinates pointed to somewhere in the jungle about 40 kilometers east of our position. Off-road, off any track I could see on the map. What's east of here? I asked Garrett when he came off his watch rotation. He thought for a moment. Nothing on the roads. Old-growth forest mostly. There was a mining survey done maybe 4 years ago. They went in looking for bauxite, didn't find enough to justify the cost, pulled out, left some equipment behind, some temporary structures. Would there be anything out there now? Any settlements? Any? No, he said it flatly. There's nothing out there that should be broadcasting on an emergency channel. I looked at the coordinates I'd written down. Sector is active. What does that mean? I don't know. I put the paper in my pocket with Dale's notebook. I don't know what it means. We moved out the next morning at 5:30, before full dawn, with the sky just lightening enough to see the road. I had everyone up at 4. Peggy handled the civilians while I did a final equipment check with Dale and Robbie. Garrett walked the perimeter one last time, quiet and systematic. We moved the civilians into the truck, 8 of them in the back, the remaining 4, the woman with the teenage daughter, and 2 men, in the cab. Robbie took the motorcycle, which was going to be our scout vehicle, and could move ahead of the truck to check the road. I drove. Dale rode in the back of the truck with his rifle. Garrett walked for the first kilometer alongside the truck, which seemed crazy, but he said he could cover the ground faster than the truck in short stretches on a curved road, because he knew the shortcuts. And he was right. When I rounded a curve, he was already there ahead of me, walking. We went through the checkpoint barrier for the last time heading north. I didn't look back. That's not true. I looked back once, at the concrete block building, and the vehicle bay, and the cracked concrete barrier with Juliet 7 stenciled in yellow, and I thought about Ferris and his extended hand. I made myself look at the road ahead. The 40-kilometer stretch of 9 Bravo was not clean. There were abandoned vehicles, 9 of them between the checkpoint and the fire road marker, some on the shoulder, some stopped dead in the road itself. 2 cars that had hit each other, locked together at the front, blocking most of the carriageway. We went around the second set slowly, the truck tipping on the shoulder slope, and one of the civilians in the back made a sound, and I heard Dale's voice back there saying, "Easy, easy," in the same low, flat tone he used for everything. I want to tell you about what we passed, because I think it's important to be honest about what the road looked like that morning. Not for dramatic effect, but because you need to understand what the world had become in about 36 hours. There was a child's shoe on the white line. Just one shoe, a yellow one. There was a vehicle with all 4 doors standing open, and the interior, I didn't look too long. The interior was dark with something. There was a section of road where something had happened. A section maybe 200 meters long, where the surface was covered in the marks of many feet, like a crowd had passed through, and among the footmarks were drag marks, parallel lines. We didn't stop. We found the fire road right where Nate Calloway had said it would be, at the 40-kilometer marker. The marker was a stone post with the number painted in white, and the fire road was just a gap in the trees on the right, with a brown post, and nothing else to indicate it was there. It was a track rather than a road. Compacted earth, 2-wheel ruts with grass growing in the center. Passable for the truck, but only if I kept the speed low and picked the line carefully. 8 kilometers of this, Nate had said. It took us 50 minutes. The ranger station came into view around a curve, in a clearing that opened suddenly from the trees. I had expected something small and basic. It was bigger than that. A main building of solid timber, maybe 20 by 15 meters, with a metal roof and shuttered windows. An outbuilding, generator shed, I guessed. A covered storage area, with drums and boxes and equipment under a roof of corrugated sheets. A water tower, small but real, with a hand pump at the base, and around all of it, a fence. A timber post fence about 2.5 meters high, functional rather than security grade, but intact. Nate Calloway was waiting at the gate. He was exactly what his voice had suggested. Lean, weathered, maybe 55, with a white beard and the permanent squint of someone who'd spent decades outdoors. He was wearing his ranger uniform, not because it still meant something officially, but because I think he was the kind of man who didn't know how to stop being what he was. He had a hunting rifle over his shoulder, and he was watching us come in with a level, steady look. Officer Pratt, he said. Nate. I shook his hand. 14 survivors, plus me and my partner. 16 total. He looked at the group coming out of the truck, at Robbie on the motorcycle, at Garrett, at Peggy, who was helping one of the women who'd been sick and was still shaky. His face was unreadable. Come in, he said. Let's get everyone settled, and then you and I need to talk. The ranger station was the best organized piece of infrastructure I'd seen in 3 days, and the contrast was enough to make my eyes sting, though I didn't say that to anyone. The main building had 4 rooms, a large common area, an equipment room, a small bunkhouse with 6 proper beds, and a kitchen. The kitchen had a gas range and 3 full gas cylinders. There was a food store in the outbuilding. Actually, 6 months of stores for 4 people, boxed and labeled, rotation dates marked with a marker pen. Everything organized in the way only someone who'd spent decades making sure a remote station didn't run out of supplies would organize it. There was a medical kit the size of a small suitcase. There was a shortwave radio with proper power from the generator. There was a fuel store, 200 liters of diesel for the generator, and a smaller amount of petrol. There was a well with a hand pump and a filtration system. There was a garden, an actual garden, behind the main building, with vegetables growing in raised beds. People sat down. People drank water that didn't come out of a car cup. Peggy found the medical kit and started doing proper wound checks. Robbie, without being asked, went to look at the generator. Nate took me and Dale to the equipment room. He had a map pinned to the wall, the forestry survey map, detailed and updated. He'd been marking it with red pen. These are where I've confirmed infections, he said, pointing to clusters of red marks. Based on radio reports and what I've seen on the road from the tower. He pointed to an observation tower I'd seen in the corner of the clearing when we came in. I have line of sight about 15 kilometers on a clear day. I've been logging what I see every morning. He'd been doing this since the 2nd day of the outbreak. Systematic observation, recording, mapping. 3 days, and he'd produced more useful intelligence about what was happening in the surrounding area than I'd been able to gather driving around. The main concentrations are on the highway and in Talang itself, he said. The fire roads are mostly clear, not all. This track here, he pointed to a track east of his station, had a group of infected about 8 this morning. They were following the track east. Don't know where they came from. Don't know where they're going. Are there other survivors? I asked. I've had radio contact with 3 groups. He pointed to 3 spots on the map, marked with blue pen. A family in a farmhouse here, 12 kilometers north. A group of 8 at the secondary forestry depot here, about 30 kilometers northwest, and something larger to the north. I've spoken to a woman who says there's a community forming at the agricultural training center near the provincial town of Kailan, about 50 kilometers north. How large? She wasn't specific. She said many families. Her radio was low on battery, and I couldn't get more before contact dropped. I stood in front of that map for a long time, long enough that Dale moved to look at something else, and Nate got himself a cup of water. Here was what I was thinking. This station was good. It was genuinely good. Better than anything I'd expected. And part of me was saying stay. Just stay here. You've got walls and water and food and a radio and a good man who knows the forest. Stay. But there was another part doing the math on 14 civilians in a station designed for 4 people, and looking at the fire road track we'd come in on, and thinking about that group of infected Nate had seen moving east that morning, and thinking about the automated coordinates I'd written on the paper in my pocket, and thinking, without being able to stop myself, about Dale. Because here's the thing about Dale that I haven't told you yet. The thing I'd been carrying since about 12 hours in, since the end of the first day. When we were loading up the checkpoint to leave, I'd watched Dale lift one of the jerry cans of petrol from the pile. He'd lifted it with his left arm, not his right, even though he was right-handed, and he'd done it carefully, protecting his right side. I'd noticed, because I was a cop, and I noticed things, and I'd filed it away, and not said anything, because the timing was wrong, and I told myself I'd deal with it when I had space. I hadn't had space. That night, 3rd night now, at the ranger station, After everyone was settled and the fire road gate was closed and Nate was on first watch, I found Dale at the edge of the clearing looking at the tree line. He heard me coming and turned. And in the light from the station window I could see he'd been favoring his right side all day, though he hit it well. "Show me," I said. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he pulled up his sleeve. On his forearm, just below the elbow, not a bite. I want to be precise. Not a bite. It was a scratch, long and ragged, across the forearm, the kind of wound you get from fingernails, and it had come from one of them when we were clearing the vehicle bay at the checkpoint. He'd been wearing his uniform sleeve, but they'd caught the fabric and pulled it back, and his forearm had gone through, and he'd said nothing about it for 3 days. I looked at the wound. It was still open, slightly. He'd kept it bandaged under his sleeve, but the bandage was old and not clean. "How long?" I said. "First day. The bay. Why didn't you? What would you have done?" I didn't answer. We both knew what the question contained. "I feel fine," he said. "I swear, I feel completely normal. Maybe it doesn't transmit that way. A scratch, not a..." "Okay. Owen. Dale. I hear you." I sat down on the ground, back against the station fence. He sat beside me. "We get Peggy to look at it. We clean it properly, and then we monitor it. And you tell me immediately if anything changes. Any headache, any fever, any... I know what the signs are. I know you know." We sat there for a while. Insects loud. Something calling from the forest, deep and low. A sound I didn't know. Not infected, just forest. "I found your notebook," I said. "In the truck glove box. I've been carrying it." He looked at me sideways. "You didn't tell me either." "No. Because you didn't know how to bring it up." "Yes." He held out his hand. I gave him the notebook. He looked at it for a moment, and then put it in his own pocket. "There was a bee-eater yesterday," he said. "On the fire road coming in. Green and orange. You'd know it if you saw one." "Okay. I just wanted you to know that." "Noted." I went inside and found Peggy, and told her about Dale's wound. She cleaned it with betadine from the big medical kit, used proper gauze, took his temperature. Normal. She didn't look at me with the question in her eyes, which I appreciated. She just treated it like a medical situation, which it was, and told him to check in with her morning and evening, and to report any changes in how he felt. I fell asleep on a cot in the bunkhouse that night for the first time in 3 days, and I slept for 6 hours straight, which was probably dangerous, but my body had made the decision without consulting me. In the morning, Garrett came to find me, before anyone else was up. "Something happened overnight," he said, not alarmed, just that steady, flat way of his. "Come and look." He'd been up before dawn, apparently. He did that, went out before first light to assess the area. I hadn't sanctioned it, but I also couldn't argue with the results. He took me to the east fence of the station. The fence here backed up close to the tree line, maybe 10 meters of open ground between fence and forest. On the ground in that 10 meters, in the earth still soft from recent rain, were tracks, animal tracks, large ones, clustered, many overlapping. "Pig," he said. "Wild boar." I looked at the tracks. There were a lot of them. Maybe 8 animals, maybe more. "We have boars out here," I said. "That's not unusual. Look at the fence." I looked. 2 of the timber posts of the fence showed deep gouging, not claw marks, more like something had been pressing against the fence, pushing at it, testing it, methodically, post to post. "Boars don't do that," I said. "No," Garrett said. "They don't." He crouched beside one of the tracks. "And look at this. The gait is wrong. The stride pattern. They were moving in a specific direction, back and forth, back and forth. They weren't foraging. They were pacing." I looked at him. "I think," he said carefully, "that whatever this is, it's not just in people." This was the second moment when I understood something was different about this. The first was when I heard the sound they made, that continuous flat vocalization. The second was standing at the east fence, looking at track patterns of animals that had been pacing the perimeter of our fence in the dark. I did not share this with everyone. Not yet. I needed to understand what we were dealing with first. I went back inside and ate breakfast. Canned beans, crackers, coffee from Nate's stock, and I thought about it. Because if it was in animals too, that changed the threat radius enormously. Human infected were dangerous, but they had limits. They walked, they responded to sound, they couldn't open doors, couldn't climb, couldn't problem solve. They were just forward motion in response to stimulus, terrifying in numbers, but predictable. But animals moved differently. A boar or a monitor lizard or any of the dozens of other species in this jungle, moving without normal animal caution, without the instinct to avoid humans that wild animals normally have, following only whatever drove the infected forward. That was a different equation. I needed to know more about what the jungle actually looked like now, and for that, I needed height. The observation tower at the ranger station was maybe 15 meters tall, a lattice of timber, solidly built, with a platform at the top and a simple ladder. Nate went up there every morning. That morning I went with him. From the top, I could see in every direction over the canopy. To the south, over the green rolling line of trees, a column of smoke rising from the direction of Talang. Thick, dark, continuous. The city was burning, or parts of it were. To the north, forest. To the west, the fire road track, a thin scar visible in the canopy for a while before it disappeared. To the east, forest, stretching unbroken to the horizon. "What's the farthest you've seen them from here?" I asked Nate. 5 kilometers, on the highway. Moving north. He handed me his binoculars. "Yesterday morning, I saw a group come out of the tree line here." He pointed southeast. "Into a clearing I know. Maybe a kilometer from here. 7 of them. They milled around for about 20 minutes and then went back into the trees." "Did they see you? Hear you?" "The generator wasn't running. I wasn't moving. No." This confirmed the sound following. Without stimulus, they drifted and milled. With stimulus, they converged. I looked east, through the binoculars, a long time, counting the distance, trying to read the forest. And then I saw something that wasn't right. In the forest to the east, about 4 or 5 kilometers out by my estimate, there was a break in the canopy. Not natural, not a river course, not a ridge. A straight break, angular. The kind of break that happens when human structures are built in forest, which push the trees back and create these unnatural straight lines visible from above. I handed the binoculars to Nate. "East. 4 or 5 kilometers. What's that?" He looked for a long time. "The mining survey camp," he said slowly. "I thought they'd completely cleared it when they pulled out. But if some of the structures are still, those coordinates I told you about, on the radio last night, the ones repeating." He looked at me. I pulled the paper from my pocket and gave it to him. He compared it to the forestry map he'd brought up to the tower. "That's it," he said. "That's exactly it." We were both quiet for a moment. "Sector is active," I said. "Yes. What does that mean to you?" He folded the paper and handed it back. His face was doing what faces do when they know something they're deciding whether to say. "When the mining survey came in 4 years ago, there was an issue. I filed a report. I didn't file it officially, because officially they had all the right permits, and I didn't have hard evidence, just what I saw from the track. But I wrote up what I observed, and I kept a copy." He looked at me steadily. "They weren't just doing a bauxite survey. What were they doing?" "I don't know. I don't know what they were doing, but they had equipment that was wrong for bauxite survey. Things you don't bring in for that kind of work. And they were very particular about who came near the survey area. I was asked, officially, to keep rangers away from a 2-kilometer radius, by name, a specific directive with a government letterhead. Which ministry? Not one I recognized. The letterhead was real, I checked later, but the ministry didn't have a public-facing presence. No website, no listing in the government directory, just the name and the address. We came down from the tower. I did not say anything to anyone else about this. Not yet. The 4th day at the ranger station was the day we established something resembling routine, which was both good and necessary. Nate ran the station with a kind of natural authority that came from decades of managing a remote outpost, And I found that if I handled the security and movement decisions and left the station management to him, things worked. The civilians had organized themselves into roles. Peggy ran the medical corner, Robbie and a quiet young man named Floyd maintained the vehicles and generator. A retired teacher named Donna kept track of supplies. The others filled in where needed. Dale checked in with Peggy twice a day. His wound was healing. His temperature stayed normal. He ate normally and moved normally, and sat with me at radio watch in the evenings like nothing had happened. And I watched him the way you watch something you love that might break. 2 things happened on day 4 that changed our situation. The first was Robbie coming to me with the motorcycle and saying he wanted to do a scout run on the fire road. He wanted to go south, back toward the main highway, to see what was moving and what was there. I said no. He looked at me like I'd mispronounced a word. I can go quiet, he said. Kill the engine before I get close to the highway. Walk the last kilometer. Look and come back. Alone? Take Garrett. I thought about it. Garrett had done more solo perimeter work in 4 days than most soldiers would attempt. He knew the forest. He knew the sounds. If anyone could do a 2-man scout run and come back without incident, it was those 2. Take a radio, I said. Check in every 30 minutes. If you miss a check-in, I come after you. Clear. They left at 10 in the morning. The radio check-ins came like clockwork. At 11:30, they reported back. The main highway was dense with infected, moving north in groups, and sometimes individually. The fire road junction was clear, but they'd spotted what looked like a large group of infected moving east on the highway, which might eventually reach the fire road if it kept going. Estimated timeline, maybe a day, maybe 2, before the concentration on the highway reached a level where the fire road junction was no longer safe. So we had a window, and we needed to decide what to do with it. The second thing that happened on day 4 was that one of the civilians, a man named Lester, came to me with a story about another provision shop, a larger one, that he knew from driving this road regularly for his work. He was a sales representative for a food distributor. He drove this road and others like it every week, and he knew where every shop, every warung, every fuel stop was along the route. The shop he was describing was back on the main highway, 15 kilometers north of the fire road junction. It had a warehouse component at the back, a proper warehouse. Supply storage for a network of smaller shops in the northern region. How much are we talking? I said. He calculated. 6 months? A year? I don't know exactly. Depends what was in rotation when the outbreak hit. But it's their main distribution point. It'll be full. I looked at the map. Highway, 15 kilometers north of the junction. No fire road approach. We'd have to go on the main road. But north of where Robbie and Garrett had seen the infected concentrations. Maybe clean. We'd need both trucks, I said, and time to load. I can get you in there in 40 minutes, Lester said. He was animated about this, his eyes bright. He was a nervous man, twitchy, hand-waving, talked fast. But when he was on the subject of his work, he became precise and confident. Loading dock at the back, pallet system. We're not hand-carrying boxes. We drive the truck up to the dock and we load pallets. I decided. We'd do the supply run the next morning. Robbie and Garrett back from their scout. All vehicles ready. Maximum load capacity prepared. That night, 5th night, I sat at the radio for 3 hours, and I rebuilt the contact map. I reached the farmhouse family, a man named Paul Reinhardt and his wife and 3 children, north on the highway, who confirmed they were alive and well supplied, but increasingly nervous about infected activity near their fence. I reached the secondary forestry depot group of 8, who were stable but had lost their generator fuel and were facing a cold night. I left a message for the agricultural center woman in Kellan, but got no response. And on the military channel, the one that had been transmitting without responding to my calls, I finally got an answer. Not from dispatch, not from regional command. A woman's voice, speaking carefully, with the precise elocution of someone who'd been trained to communicate under stress. Officer Pratt, this is Lieutenant Dawson, Army Signal Corps, currently attached to the emergency response element at Kellan Agricultural Training Center. I've been monitoring your calls on this channel for 2 days. I gripped the handset. Lieutenant Dawson, How many people do you have? At Kellen Center, 61. Military and civilian. We are operational. We have a perimeter. We have power. We are looking to expand our communications network to identify isolated survivor groups and bring them into a coordinated framework. Your position. I know about the center, I said. I have 17 people at a ranger station, 22 kilometers south of the highway junction at the 40-kilometer mark on 9 Bravo. We have a vehicle fleet, supplies, and a man who knows the forest grid. A pause. I could almost hear her thinking. 17 people. That's significant. What's your secure communication capability? Shortwave radio, adequate power, reasonable range. I can maintain contact. Then let's maintain it. Another pause. Officer Pratt, we're going to need everything we can get for what's coming. What you've been seeing on the highway, the concentrations moving north. We're seeing the same thing from air reconnaissance. What you're looking at is the edge of a migration event. The infected populations from the city are moving outward, radially, following roads, following sound, following food. The concentration is going to grow as stragglers join the main body. Best estimate from the people I'm working with. She stopped. She'd been about to say something and had decided how much to say. Best estimate is that the main body of the highway migration reaches your area in 5 to 7 days. 5 to 7 days. Then we need to move, I said. Not necessarily, if your position is defensible. It's not. Not against the numbers you're describing. The station has a timber fence and 16 people. We can't hold that against a mass migration. Then you need a better position, or you need to move to Kellan. What would it take to get from here to Kellan? She described a route. The fire road to the main highway, north to Kellan, 50 kilometers. On a clear highway, an hour. On the highway as it currently was, unknown. The last report from the highway 20 kilometers south of Kellan had been a mixed picture. Some clear sections, some congested with abandoned vehicles, some with infected concentrations. What if we didn't go by highway? I said. What if we went through the forest? Silence. The forestry grid, I said. My ranger contact knows the network of fire roads and forestry tracks between here and Kellan. If there's a route that avoids the main highway, a route through the forest, in vehicles, 17 people. She was processing it. It would take longer. It might be safer. It might also put you in the middle of nowhere when your vehicles fail. They won't fail, I said, thinking of Robbie and Floyd and what they'd done to the station generator in one afternoon. My people know what they're doing. She was quiet for a moment. Give me 24 hours to look at the forestry maps and see what I can send you. I have access to survey data that might help your ranger plot a route. Can you be in contact same time tomorrow? Yes. Then same time tomorrow. And Officer Pratt, keep your people together and keep your noise down. The migration event we're tracking, it's not just people. I know, I said. We saw the boar tracks. Another pause. Longer. What you're seeing with the animals, it's not isolated. We don't know the full scope yet. Just keep your noise down. I put down the handset. I sat in the truck in the dark for a few minutes. The jungle was doing its night thing. Layered sound, different from the day sound, heavier and slower. Frogs mostly at this hour. Something high and flickering that might have been bats. I got out of the truck and walked to where Dale was sitting on the station steps, on his own, cup of something hot. How are you feeling? I asked. Same as this morning. Same as last night. He looked at me. Same as before. Peggy's check-in was clear. Temperature normal. Wound healing. Owen, I'm fine. I sat beside him. We're moving in 2 days. Maybe 3. There's a settlement at Kellan. Proper military presence. 60+ people. We need to get there before the migration wave from the city catches us. He absorbed this. Route? Through the forest. Nate plots the fire road network. We go off highway as much as possible. How long a journey? Could be a day. Could be 2. Depends on the tracks. He nodded slowly. He drank his cup of whatever it was. We sat. Dale, I said it carefully, the scratch is fine. I know. But if it changes, you'll be the first person I tell. I promise. I believed him. I still believe him. That's not the issue. The issue was whether what I believed matched what was actually happening, and whether there would be a gap between those two things, and whether I would be able to close that gap in time. I was not sure. I was not at all sure. The next morning, we did the supply run. Me, Robbie, Lester, Garrett, both trucks. We left at first light with Nate and Dale in charge of the station. The fire road to the highway junction was clear. We hit the main highway and went north, and the highway was better than I'd feared. There were abandoned vehicles, but with both trucks we could navigate around most of them, and the infected we saw were small groups, not the concentrations Robbie and Garrett had described from the scout run. The concentrations were south. North was mostly clear. 15 kilometers north we found the warehouse. Lester had not undersold it. The building was a proper commercial structure, larger than anything I'd expected on this stretch of highway. The warehouse component at the back was accessed by a loading dock, exactly like he'd described. The doors were unlocked. The warehouse was undisturbed. Nobody had found it yet, or nobody who'd found it had had the vehicles to take advantage of it. I am going to try to describe how it felt to walk into a stocked warehouse when you've been living on crackers and sardines for 5 days, because I think it's important. It felt wrong, like we'd stepped into a world that hadn't been informed of what had happened. Boxes stacked to the ceiling on metal shelving, all the ordinary products of ordinary life. Rice and flour and canned food and cooking oil and sugar and salt and soap and toilet paper and medicine, all of it just sitting there in the orderly dark like it was waiting for the Tuesday delivery. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds and then I said, "Let's move," and we started loading. We loaded both trucks as full as they would take and still move safely. Rice, canned goods, oil, medicine, batteries, cleaning products, rope, tools, and petrol, because beside the loading dock, there was a 200-liter drum of petrol, unmistakably petrol by the smell and by the stenciled label, and we emptied it into both trucks and our empty jerry cans. We were there for 90 minutes total. It was the most valuable 90 minutes of the outbreak so far. On the way back, we saw something that stayed with me. About 3 kilometers north of the Fire Road Junction, on the east side of the highway, there was a section of roadside barrier where someone had spray painted on it in large orange letters. Not a message exactly, just a series of short phrases in different handwriting, like more than one person had added to it as they passed through. North is clear as of Monday. Talang is gone. Anyone heading to Kalen, Army is there. Don't stop in Raub, all gone. And at the bottom, in different paint, very small, there are things in the forest that should not be there. I drove past it. I didn't point it out. Robbie read it. I saw him reading it in the passenger mirror, and he didn't say anything either. Back at the station, unloading the trucks took another hour. Everyone worked. The mood was different after the supply run. Genuinely different. The way mood shifts when the most basic fear, the fear of running out, is addressed, even if only temporarily. I had my radio call with Lieutenant Dawson that evening. She had something for me. Her people had pulled the forestry survey data and plotted a route. It was not a simple route. It used 4 separate fire roads and 2 forestry tracks that might require some clearance work. But it was a route that avoided the main highway for all but about 8 kilometers at the very start of the journey. The total distance through forest was about 40 kilometers, with the final stretch coming out on the road to Kelan from the north side. She read me the bearings, the junction points, the key markers. I wrote it all down and gave it to Nate, who went over it with his own maps for the next 2 hours, marking the forestry charts and making his own notes. "It's doable," Nate said when he was done. "Some of the tracks are going to be rough. The C7 forestry access hasn't been maintained in 6 or 7 years. There are sections where the canopy has grown across, and we'll need to cut through. But the underlying ground is solid." "How long?" 14 hours of travel time, if nothing goes wrong. Double that if something does. I'd planned for 2 days. 2 days in the forest, with infected moving through the jungle in unknown patterns, infected animals in the trees, 2 trucks and a motorcycle, 17 people, 2 days. "We need more intelligence on what's in the forest before we move," I said. "Agreed. I'll go up the tower at first light and do a full survey. I can also, there's a ranger friend of mine, a man named Keith Burrows, who was posted at Station 7, about 12 kilometers east. I've been trying to raise him, but no luck. If he's there, his station is almost on our route. We could stop. And if he's not there? Nate's face did the careful thing again. His supplies would be... I'm going to tell you about the watchtower conversation now, because it's where a lot of what happened next came from. It was day 6. We were a day from moving out. I'd been up the tower twice more in those 6 days, watching the tree line, watching the highway column of smoke to the south, which had been growing and was now a permanent feature of the southern horizon. Garrett had been doing his perimeter walks, and on day 6, he came back from his morning walk with something different in his expression. "The boar tracks from the other night," he said. "They're back. More of them this time. And they're not just along the east fence anymore. They circled the entire station perimeter sometime overnight." "Circled the entire thing?" "Yes." "How big is the group?" "I'm estimating 12 to 15 animals from the track density. A group of 15 infected boar. Wild boars are not small animals. An adult boar can weigh 80–100 kilograms. They have tusks. They don't back down from much, even in normal circumstances. And in the infected state, without normal animal caution, without the instinct to avoid threats, they would be a different order of problem than what I'd been dealing with. I didn't have a solution to the boar problem. What I had was a reinforced awareness that staying at the station was not indefinitely safe, even without the human infection migration event to the south. "We move tomorrow," I told Nate. "Not 2 days. Tomorrow, after first light, we're leaving." Nate looked at me, and then looked at the forest to the east and nodded. "I'll finalize the route tonight." That evening, sitting with the radio after Dawson's check-in, she confirmed the migration event was tracking north and ahead of schedule. 4 or 5 days now, not 5 to 7. I had a conversation with Robbie that I've thought about a lot since. He came to the truck not for any stated purpose, just drifted over the way he did when he had something on his mind that he was working up to. He sat in the passenger seat and looked at the dashboard for a while. "The motorcycle," he said. "I want to ride Scout. Ahead of the trucks, through the forest. Keep them out of trouble. It's a 2-day journey on rough tracks. I've been riding rough tracks since I was 12. My uncle had a farm and the only way to get between the fields was..." He stopped and his face changed. "His farm's about 60 kilometers west. I keep thinking about that. I keep thinking about whether..." He stopped again. I didn't fill the silence for him. "You can't go 60 kilometers west right now," he said to himself. "You know that. It doesn't matter what you keep thinking about it." "No," I said. "You can't." He nodded. He looked at his hands for a moment. The permanently stained hands of someone who'd been working with his hands since he could hold a wrench. "When this is over," he said. "When this is over." He looked at me. "Do you think it ends?" I thought about it honestly. I think things like this, they don't end the way you want them to. They just change. The bad thing doesn't go away, but you adjust around it. And eventually, the adjusted world is the normal world. I thought about the woman at the radio station saying migration event. But it has to get worse before it can get better. How much worse? I didn't answer. He didn't really want me to. He went back inside. I sat with the radio for another hour, and then I went to Dale's bunk. He was awake. Of course he was awake. He barely slept anymore. He'd been sleeping less since day 3, and he hadn't said it was connected to anything, and I hadn't pushed it. People sleep less when they're scared. That's normal. "We leave tomorrow," I said. "I know. I heard. How do you feel?" "Owen," he said it flatly. Not frustrated, just flat. "I need to know, Dale. I need to know exactly." He looked at me in the dark. "I feel normal. I feel exactly like I always feel. I'm tired, yes. I'm scared. But I have no symptoms. No fever, no headache, no confusion, no..." He stopped. "No changes." "Okay. But I've been thinking about something." "Yeah. If I do start to change," he said it steady. "If Peggy catches it in a check-in, or if I feel something, I want to be the one who makes the call. I don't want you to have to..." "Dale, I'm serious. I'm telling you this now so it's on the table, and you're not carrying the whole weight of it. I know what the call is. I know what needs to happen. I'm not going to pretend I don't know. I just want you to let me be the one who decides when. I sat with that for a long time. Okay, I said finally. You decide. Thank you. I went back to the radio room, and I sat there alone for another hour, and then I finally let myself think about Ferris. Really think about him, which I'd been not doing, because there was always something more urgent to do. Ferris, who I'd left behind. Ferris's hand above the group of them, still moving. Whether still moving meant something, or was just the movement of a thing. I came back to that hand. In the dark. Over and over. In the morning, we left. Nate had plotted the route in 3 segments, each marked on a laminated copy of the forestry map that he'd made using the station's printer. Segment 1, the fire road south and east, to a junction with C7 forestry access. Segment 2, C7 track east and north, to a crossroads where Station 7 should be. Segment 3, north on the old survey road, to the point where we'd join the highway at its northern extension, only 8 kilometers from Kelon. We moved at 5:45. Robbie went first on the motorcycle, maybe 200 meters ahead of the lead truck. Nate rode with me in the patrol truck because he knew the route and could call turns. Dale was in the back of the patrol truck with 4 of the civilians. The second truck, the pickup, was driven by a quiet older man named Floyd, who'd been a logistics driver before and had the steady, non-emotional relationship with vehicles that good drivers develop. 6 more civilians in the back of the pickup. Garrett walked the first section. He did it without ceremony, just appeared beside the truck with his machete and his pack, and walked. He could run the track as fast as the trucks moved it. The forest swallowed us. That's the only way I can describe it. You leave the clearing, you go through the tree line, and then you are enclosed. The canopy comes down over the track, and the sound changes. The open sky sound, the wind sound, the distant horizon sound, all cut off, and instead, you have the intimate, dense, close sound of jungle around and above. Leaves, insects, birds, the creak of the truck on uneven ground, the occasional slap of a branch against the cab. It was beautiful in a way I didn't feel I had the right to appreciate given the circumstances. I noticed it anyway. The first 2 hours went well. C7 forestry access was rough but passable. The undergrowth had come back across the track in places, and Garrett cleared it with the machete, quick, efficient cuts. And Robbie would circle back on the motorcycle and check the cleared section before we drove through. We found one point where a large tree had fallen across the track, and we had to go around it through about 30 meters of dense undergrowth, which took us 40 minutes and left scratches on both trucks. We stopped at mid-morning for water and a short rest. 14 people out of the trucks, stretching, peeing in the undergrowth. Nate checked his position against the map. We were on schedule. That was when we found the first of them in the jungle. Not a group, just one. A single infected man, standing in the trees about 20 meters from the track, just standing there, not moving. No sound source to pull him toward, just standing. I saw him first. I put my hand up for silence, and everyone went quiet immediately, which told me they'd been paying attention. The infected man was in the trees, not fully visible, just partly, his shoulder and the side of his face visible between the trunks. He was making that sound, that low, continuous vocalization. He had not seen us. Or rather, I don't know if seen is the right word. I'm still not sure how their senses work exactly. He had not located us. We were downwind, I think. We were quiet. He was oriented slightly away from us, toward the east. Nate put his mouth close to my ear and said one word: wait. We waited. 2 minutes, 3. The man in the trees didn't move. He was just standing there, making that sound, facing east. Then slowly, incrementally, like something had reached him from that direction, he began to move. One step, then another, heading east, away from us. We watched him go. When he was out of sight and the sound had faded, Garrett, who'd been crouching beside the nearest tree, stood up and looked at me. He raised his eyebrows. I nodded. We moved. The infected animals. I should tell you about the first time we properly encountered them, not just tracked them. It was on the C7 track, around midday, at a section of the track that passed through what must have been a low area, because the canopy thinned here and there was more light, and the undergrowth was denser on both sides. We heard them before we saw them, a sound that was not normal pig sound. Wild boars make a range of sounds, grunts and squeals, and Garrett knew them all. This was something different, a kind of continuous low sound that was the animal version of what the infected humans made, like their internal systems were running a constant process, and the sound was a byproduct. They came out of the left side of the track, 4 boars, running, not charging, not the classic boar charge you hear about, head down, straight at the target, moving forward, just forward, fast, in the same mindless way the human infected moved, but faster, because boars can move faster than people, and they were weaving between the trees, and onto the track, and toward the lead truck. I was in the lead truck. Robbie was 50 meters ahead on the motorcycle. I did not have time to think. I stamped on the accelerator, and the truck moved forward, and the first boar hit the front bumper and went under, and there was a sound I will not describe in detail, and then I was past, and driving fast, and in the mirror, I saw the other 3 boars standing in the track behind us, not continuing the chase, just standing. Robbie was on the radio immediately. "All clear ahead, no contacts ahead. How are you?" "Fine," I said. "We're fine. Keep moving." The pickup came through without contact. The boars didn't follow. We drove. That was another observation. They converged, but they didn't pursue beyond a certain distance. Once whatever had attracted them, the truck engine, the noise, moved out of range, they stopped following and went back to their aimless forward motion. This was important. It meant you could outrun them if you had a vehicle. If you were on foot, it was a different calculation. We reached Station 7 3 hours later. The station was smaller than Nate's. A single building, storage shed, no fence, no generator of any obvious kind. The fire road ran right past the front door. From a distance it looked intact, and I thought for a moment that Keith Burrows, Nate's ranger friend, might be there. The windows weren't broken, the door was closed. We stopped about 50 meters out, and I went in alone, which was not the smart thing to do, and Dale said so from the truck window. "I know," I said. "Stay here." The door opened inward. The interior was dark. The shutters were all closed. I stood in the doorway for a long moment, smelling. Not looking. Smelling. Because there's a smell when things have gone bad in a space, and I'd learned to notice it. I smelled dust. Old food. Wood. No decay. That was good. I went in. The station had been occupied recently, a week ago, maybe less. The food that was left on the table was not rotten, just old. A tin mug still had dried coffee residue in the bottom. There was a bed in the back room, made, with a pack on it, opened. Contents still in it. On the table was a notebook. Not Dale's kind, a larger one, ruled, the kind used for logs and records. I opened it. Keith Burrows had been logging daily observations since day 1 of the outbreak. Neat, precise, dated entries. What he'd seen, what he'd heard on the radio, what he'd observed about infected movement in his area. The last entry was 6 days ago. It read, "Infected density increasing on Fire Road Track North. Heard large animal movement overnight, not normal. 3 nights now. The boars, I think. Cannot confirm species, but sound is wrong. Am going to try to reach Nat on radio. No luck for 2 days. Considering moving out tomorrow. Taking pack. If anyone finds this, I was alive and well until this date. I am going northwest toward highway, looking for road access. My name is Keith Burrows, Ranger, Station 7. If you find this, tell Nathan Calloway I left on my own." Nate read it in the truck. He was quiet for a long time. Then he put the notebook down very carefully and looked at the tree line. "He would have gone northwest," Nate said. "That's the route he knew." "Which direction is northwest from here?" "Away from where we're going." "Do you know if he made it?" Nate shook his head. He didn't say anything. We took the supplies from Station 7. I felt like a thief doing it, and I did it anyway. The food was useful. The medical supplies were useful. A set of radio equipment in the storage shed was very useful. We loaded what we could and moved. The second half of day 1 in the forest was harder. The track degraded significantly past Station 7. Nate had warned me, but actually driving it was worse than the warning. There were sections where the track was basically just vegetation that had been pushed aside by occasional vehicle passage and had grown back thick. Garrett and Robbie worked the front, clearing and checking. We made maybe half the speed we'd made in the morning. We stopped for the night at 5 in the afternoon. There was a wide spot in the track at a forestry crossroads, a small open area, maybe 20 meters across, where the tracks had been cut back to allow vehicles to turn. The canopy opened here slightly, and there was room for both trucks and some ground space. We made camp, I say. Camp. We didn't have tents. We had the truck beds and the ground. People slept in the trucks where they could. I slept under the patrol truck on a piece of tarpaulin I'd taken from the station. It was not comfortable. The ground of the jungle floor, even in a cleared area, is irregular and alive in ways that are hard to ignore. I woke up twice to sounds and lay still both times, listening, not moving, until I could identify the source. First time, Garrett, making a quiet perimeter check. Second time, something in the trees to the north, not infected, just the jungle being the jungle. Third time, and this was not a waking but a jolt, something that went straight from asleep to fully alert, was around 2 in the morning, and what I heard was Dale coughing. Mild cough, just a cough, from the truck above me, where he'd been sleeping. I lay still and listened and heard it again, twice more, and then silence. I lay there for a long time, my eyes open in the dark of the jungle, listening to rain beginning to fall on the canopy above, that specific sound of rain on leaves that starts light and becomes a roar, listening to Dale not coughing. It was just a cough. People cough. He'd been sleeping in the truck for 2 days, and the air was damp, and the position was uncomfortable. A cough did not mean anything. I said this to myself several times. I did not sleep again until almost 4. In the morning I looked at Dale, and I watched him eat breakfast, and I watched him move, and there was nothing. He was Dale. He drank his coffee from the big thermos we'd brought from the station. He ate crackers with tinned fish. He helped Floyd check the truck's oil level before we moved out. He looked fine. Peggy's morning check. Temperature normal. Wound healing well. Almost closed now. I breathed. Day 2 in the forest. The final segment. This part was the hardest of the whole journey, not because of infected, but because of the state of the old survey road that formed our last 20 kilometers. The survey road had been built for the mining operation 4 years ago and had been cut fast and cheap. Raw earth, no compaction, no drainage. 4 years of rain and growth had done significant work on it. There were sections that were essentially riverbed. We had to chain the trucks together at one point and winch through a section that had eroded into a muddy channel a meter deep. It took 6 hours to cover 20 kilometers. By the time we were through it, everyone was covered in red-brown mud, and the trucks were riding lower than I was comfortable with, loaded with supplies and people. But we came out of the forest onto a sealed road that, according to Nate's map, was the northern approach to Kellan, and the junction with the main highway was 8 kilometers ahead. Robbie came back on the motorcycle from a scout run with the report I'd been hoping for. Road clear, no significant infected concentrations, some abandoned vehicles but passable. To the south, on the main highway at the junction, the highway was busy with infected movement. But north, in our direction, clear. We drove those 8 kilometers without incident. The agricultural training center at Kellan was not what I expected, and was also exactly what I expected. A large compound, proper walls, not timber fencing. Concrete block walls maybe 3 meters tall. The kind of walls they build around institutional agricultural land to keep wildlife out. Not designed for what they were now being used for, but serving the purpose reasonably well. Military vehicles inside the compound. A guard post at the gate with proper sentries. They saw us coming on the road. By the time we reached the gate, a small group had come out to meet us. 2 soldiers and a woman in civilian clothes who turned out to be Lieutenant Dawson, who I'd only known as a voice. She was younger than I'd expected. Maybe 32, 33. She had the short, neat bearing of someone who'd been military her whole adult life. And she looked at our convoy, 2 muddy trucks, and a motorcycle, and 17 people who collectively looked like they'd been living in a jungle for a week, which we had, with an expression that was trying to be neutral and not quite succeeding. "Officer Pratt," she said. "Lieutenant Dawson." I shook her hand. "We made it." She looked past me at the group coming down from the trucks. Elderly people and young ones. Civilians who'd been managing with what they had. A retired nurse and a mechanic in his 20s, and a land surveyor with a machete. And Nate, who was the last out, stepping down from the truck with his map and his gear, and his 28 years of knowing this forest. "Come inside," Dawson said. "All of you. I won't give you a full account of the first hours at Kalun because they were mostly practical. Medical checks for everyone. Assignment of space in the center's dormitories. Food that was actual cooked food for the first time in a week. People cried. I didn't cry, but I came close when a woman at the kitchen counter handed me a bowl of rice with actual vegetables in it, and I just stood there holding it. But I want to tell you about the conversation I had with Dawson that evening, because that's where the larger picture started to come clear. She took me to the center's main office, which had been set up as a command room of sorts. Maps, radios, a board with location markers, a duty roster on the wall. 3 other people in the room, 2 of them soldiers, 1 a civilian who was introduced as a public health researcher from the university in the capital, who'd been trapped here when the outbreak reached the city. His name was Peter Langhurst, thin, spectacled, with the slightly dazed look of an academic who'd been dropped into a field situation and was still processing the adjustment. But his eyes were sharp. "I understand you found evidence of something unusual," Dawson said to me. "The broadcast, the coordinates, and the mining camp at those coordinates," I said. "We saw the structures from the observation tower. Did you go there?" "No. I had 17 people and 2 trucks, and a 5-day timeline. I didn't go there." She nodded slowly. "What do you know about what was operating at that location 4 years ago?" I told her what Nate had told me. The non-standard equipment, the government directive keeping rangers away, the ministry that didn't have a public presence. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, Peter Langhurst spoke for the first time. "We've been looking at the outbreak's origin point," he said, "based on the timeline of the first cases we could identify and the geographic spread pattern." He went to the map on the wall. "The first confirmed cases in Talang were 4 days before you were at the checkpoint. But cases outside Talang, in the rural areas, appear earlier, not later. Earlier. What does that mean? It means the outbreak didn't start in the city and spread outward. It started somewhere outside the city and spread inward." He pointed at the map. His finger landed on the area where the mining coordinates were. "Something in this area spread first. We don't know what. We don't know how. But the pattern is very clear." I sat with this. "The infected animals," I said. "The boars around the station. The movement in the jungle. If the origin was in a jungle location, then the animal population would have been exposed first," Langhurst said. "Before the human population." "Yes." "And the broadcast? The sector is active message?" Dawson and Langhurst exchanged a look. "We think it's automated," Dawson said carefully. "We think whatever was operating at that site had a monitoring system that's been running on battery backup since the facility was abandoned. The active status may refer to the spread, a monitoring system detecting spread. You're saying whatever they were doing out there in the jungle had a system that was specifically designed to monitor whether it was spreading. That's one interpretation." She said it carefully. "Do you have a better one?" She didn't answer. "We need to go there," I said. She looked at me sharply. "No. There are supplies in that location probably. There may be equipment. There may be information about what we're actually dealing with. There are also..." She stopped. "There are also infected animals in unknown numbers, and an unknown facility in the middle of the jungle." "Yes, I know. But if there's information there about the origin of this thing, about what it actually is, that changes our ability to deal with it long term." I leaned forward. "We can't just make walls and wait. We need to understand what we're surviving." She was quiet for a long time. The other people in the room were quiet too. "Give me 2 days," she said finally. "Let your people rest. Let my team review what you've told me. 2 days, and then we'll have a more specific conversation about what's possible. 2 days, I agreed. I went back to the dormitory and found Dale already in a bunk, asleep. I stood at the door of the room for a while and watched him sleep. Normal breathing, normal color. Just a person, sleeping. Just Dale. I slept for 9 hours, and I didn't wake up once, which was the first time since the checkpoint. When I woke up, the light coming through the dormitory window was morning light. Real solid morning, and the center was already busy. The sound of people doing things, cooking sounds from the kitchen, the generator running, voices. I lay there for a while in the ordinary morning, and I thought about checkpoint Juliet 7 and the yellow Juliet 7 stencil on the concrete barrier, and the kingfisher that Dale heard the morning before everything went wrong. Fast trill. 3 notes. Those 2 days of rest were both a relief and a strain. The relief part is obvious. The strain was that rest gives you time to think, and I had things I did not want to think about. I processed them anyway, sitting on the wall of the center in the early mornings before most people were up, watching the road and the surrounding countryside from my vantage point, which was high enough to see over the walls and out to the paddies and fields and the distant tree line. The center itself was functioning better than I'd imagined a survivor settlement could function at this stage. 61 people before we arrived, 78 now, organized into working groups, food production underway in the center's agricultural plots, medical station running, security rotation on the walls, a school for the children. Someone had thought to start teaching the children, which seems trivial and is not, because children who aren't doing anything structured become a specific kind of problem, and also because there's something about normalcy, about maintaining the shape of a normal world even inside a crisis, that matters for keeping people sane. Dawson ran the military side of things, and a woman named Helen, who'd been the center's actual director before, ran the civilian side. They seemed to have worked out between them how to manage the overlap. Not perfectly. There were frictions, but they'd worked out enough. On the first rest day, Robbie disappeared for 6 hours and came back with another motorcycle, a bigger one, from a house about a kilometer from the center, and spent the afternoon tuning both bikes to run together. Nobody asked him to do this. He just did it. He was that kind of person. On the second rest day, Garrett came to find me on the wall. He sat beside me, the way he did, not rushing, looking at the landscape for a while before speaking. "You're going to the mining camp," he said, not a question. "Eventually, yes. I know the way in. There's a track that's not on any official map, used by the illegal timber operations in that area before they were shut down. Goes in from the east. Avoids the main survey road, which will be visible from whatever is monitoring that area." "You knew about the timber operations." He looked at me sideways. I was surveying land adjacent to the concession. It was not... I didn't ask hard questions about what I saw. I should have. I filed my surveys and went home, and I didn't ask. He looked back at the fields. "I know the area well. I can get you in without using any road that anyone would be watching. You don't have to come." "I know I don't have to come." He paused. "Have you figured out what happened at the logging camp?" "My camp?" "Not in detail. The men I was with. They'd been in that area for 3 months. Some of them went east on weekends, into the restricted zone. I know they did. They said there was an old compound there with some structures that made a good place to sleep. Better than the camp. Some of them brought things back. Equipment they found, supplies left behind. I didn't think about it then. I think about it now." He didn't say the rest. He didn't have to. "Garrett," I said it carefully, "you don't carry that, don't I? The men who went into that compound, they made their own choice. And whatever is in that compound, it's not your responsibility." "No," he agreed without conviction, "but knowing what's there is. Because if I'd asked harder questions 3 months ago, you didn't know." "No," he looked at the tree line, "but I know now." We sat together for a while longer. The morning insects were going. A bird somewhere, some kind of fast trill. I thought, kingfisher, maybe. Dawson came to me on the afternoon of the second day with an update and a request. The update. Her people had been monitoring the highway south of Kelan, and the migration wave that had been tracked north from Talang was moving faster than expected. It had incorporated infected populations from several smaller towns along the route, and the current estimate was a mass of several thousand moving north on the main road. The forward edge would reach the area south of Kelan in 2 to 3 days. 2 to 3 days. Which means, I said, that we need to be prepared to hold this position against that. Yes. How prepared are we? She walked me through it. The walls were good. The supplies were now, with what we'd brought, substantially better. The military contingent, 12 soldiers with proper weapons and ammunition, was capable. But 12 soldiers and 60-odd civilians against several thousand infected on the main highway was a number problem, even with the walls. We need to make the highway less attractive, she said. Not to us specifically, as a route. If we can create enough disruption south of here that the main body of the migration diverges, goes around rather than through. How would you do that? Noise? Draw them off the main road. There are side roads that go east and west of the highway. If we can create a sound, draw on those side roads, significant enough to divert a substantial portion of the horde. What kind of sound? She looked at me carefully. Large, continuous, automated. Something they can't stop following. She paused. Something like what's broadcasting at the mining camp. I let that sit. You want to access the broadcasting equipment, I said, and use it as a draw. If it exists, and if it's accessible, and if your land surveyor can find the route. He says he can. Then we have a potential solution to the highway problem. But it requires going to that facility. In 2 days. In less than 2 days if possible. Preferably tomorrow morning. I looked at her for a moment. How many people do you want on that run? Small. As small as possible. The less noise getting there, the better. Me, Garrett, Robbie. Maybe one of your soldiers. I'll send Corporal Adkins. He's been in jungle operations before. Is he good? She looked at me, with an expression that contained about 40 years of professional assessment. He's alive, she said. I went to find Dale. He was in the vehicle bay, talking to Floyd about the trucks. They'd managed to find a partial set of tools in the center's workshop and were doing a proper maintenance check on both vehicles. I took Dale away from this conversation by the simple expedient of appearing at the workshop door and tilting my head. He came. We walked to the far end of the compound, near the eastern wall, where there was a gap between 2 storage sheds that was always empty. I'd used it twice as a thinking spot. The mining camp run, I said. Tomorrow. I know, Garrett told me. I want you to stay here. He looked at me. Not because, I started. I know why. You're healing well, I know. Peggy says clear. But you need me here in case something goes wrong out there and you're not back. You need me to handle things. Yes, I said. That's why. He studied me. That's the honest answer, or it's the convenient one. Both. He let out a slow breath. If I were in your position, you'd make the same call. Maybe. He looked at the eastern wall, as if he could see through it to the forest beyond. What do you think is out there, in that camp? I don't know. Honestly, I think someone was doing something in the jungle that they didn't want people to know about. And I think it went wrong in a way that nobody planned for. And I think whatever went wrong is what we're all living inside right now. And you think knowing exactly what it was changes something? I think knowing what it was changes everything about how you fight it. I paused. Or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we get there and it's just old equipment and an automated signal on a loop, and there's nothing to learn. But I'd rather know that too. He nodded. He put his hand on my shoulder, briefly, and then let go. Come back, he said. That's the plan. I'm serious, Owen. Come back. I'm serious too. We left at 6 the next morning, 4 of us. Me, Garrett, Robbie, and Corporal Adkins, who turned out to be a quiet man in his late 20s, with calm eyes and a compact build, and the habit of moving without making noise, which I appreciated immediately. Robbie, on the scout motorcycle. Garrett and Adkins on foot, which Garrett had insisted on. For the last stretch, on the track he knew, he said he'd move better without a vehicle, and Adkins agreed. I drove the patrol truck. The forest track that Garrett knew from the timber operation was accessed from a side road east of Kellan. We drove the side road to where it ended at a rusted gate and a fence, the boundary of whatever operation had used the area, and we went through the gate, Garrett leading. The track beyond the gate was overgrown but identifiable. Garrett moved like the forest was just a room he knew well, not checking a map, not hesitating at junctions, just going. The truck followed the track where it could, and where it couldn't, Robbie took the motorcycle, and I went on foot. We covered the 12 kilometers in under 2 hours. The first sign was a cleared area visible through the trees. Then a fence, chain link, higher than the forestry fence, still intact. Then buildings. The facility was not large, smaller than the ranger station in footprint, though more solidly built. 3 structures. A main building of prefabricated metal, very clearly not jungle construction, the kind of thing you'd see at a research installation. A smaller structure that had the look of a generator block, and an open-sided shed with equipment under tarps. The main building's door was, and this is the thing that told me something, the main building's door was open from the inside. Not forced, not broken, opened and left that way. Someone had left in a hurry, probably, or hadn't expected to need to come back and close it. We went in. Inside, laboratory equipment. I'm not a scientist and I can't give you a detailed technical description, but I can tell you what I saw with a policeman's eyes. 2 long bench units with what looked like biocontainment gear, sealed chambers, the kind with rubber gloves you insert your hands into to manipulate things inside without direct contact. Computer equipment, dead now, no power. Filing cabinets, 3 of them, 2 closed and 1 standing open. Empty glass containers, some sealed, some not. And on one bench, a series of what I can only describe as specimens, sealed containers with material inside, labeled in a combination of numbers and letters that I couldn't parse. And on the wall, a map, identical in format to a standard forestry survey map, but overlaid with markings, circles and radii and arrows in different colors. The smallest circle was centered on this facility. The larger circles expanded outward. The arrows pointed along the roads, and the outermost circle, drawn in red, encompassed an area that included Talang, that included where the checkpoint had been. I took photographs with my phone, moving through every angle of the room, even though I didn't know if I'd ever have connectivity to send them to anyone. I documented everything systematically. In the filing cabinet that was standing open, the files had been left in disorder. Someone had gone through them fast, but some remained. I took them all. I'm going to summarize what they told me, because the technical language is beyond my ability to interpret fully. But the summary, as best I understood it, this had been a field research installation. The research was biological. The work was classified under a ministry designation I recognized as the one Nate had described, the ministry without a public presence. The work related to a naturally occurring phenomenon in the jungle soil and water, something that appeared in wildlife populations in cycles, and had never been studied because it appeared in remote areas and resolved itself before anyone looked too closely. The facility had been studying this phenomenon. The last entry in the most recent file was a terse note, containment protocol failure, initiating evacuation, broadcasting emergency exclusion zone signal on emergency channels. Do not approach facility. All data preserved on secure server. And then it stopped. The filing cabinet held about 2 years of field notes. I took them all. In the generator building, Robbie found the transmitter. It was still running. Battery backup, as Dawson had said. Still broadcasting on a loop. The sector is active message. Still telling anyone listening to stay away from the facility where the thing had started. Can we change what it broadcasts? I asked Robbie. He looked at the equipment. He looked at it the way he looked at engines, not reading it theoretically but practically, following the connections, tracing the physical logic of it. Yeah, he said after about 4 minutes. The output is analog. There's an input jack here. I can feed in a new audio source and override the loop. You want a different message? I want a continuous loud sound, not a message, a signal that will work as a draw, something that carries. I can connect the truck horn to this, he said. The truck horn runs on battery. I can bridge from the truck battery through here and run the horn signal continuously through the transmitter. Range is, he looked at the transmission unit. Range is good. This is serious equipment. This will carry a long way. How long to set it up? 2 hours. We have 2 hours, I said. Maybe 3. Let's do it. Adkins and Garrett held the perimeter. I went through the files. Robbie worked. I will tell you this about reading those files in that facility in the jungle. It is a strange thing to understand. In pieces, in technical language, you're only partly equipped to parse what happened, what the natural thing in the soil was, what the research facility did or didn't do, exactly what went wrong. I don't understand it fully. I probably never will. But I understand enough. I understand that whatever is driving the infected is not something anyone designed. It's something that exists in this landscape, that has existed in cycles for who knows how long, that usually burns through local animal populations and fades. I understand that something about the proximity of the research facility, the work they were doing, the exposure of the researchers, and then the things they brought back, or carried, or that traveled with them when they evacuated. Something accelerated the cycle, pushed it into the human population, gave it a vector it hadn't had before. I understand that the facility's own monitoring system, still broadcasting on the emergency channel, detected spread and recorded it. Sector is active. The sector had been active for almost a week before anyone in the city even knew what was happening. And I understand, from a note buried in the last week of field notes, in the handwriting of someone who was clearly writing in a hurry, that the thing itself, whatever biological mechanism drives the infected behavior, doesn't last forever in any single host. There is a degradation rate. In animals, the research suggested, the degradation was faster than in humans. The boars we'd seen, the ones tracking the fence at night, the ones that had hit the truck on the forest track, might have been days away from simply stopping. In humans, the degradation was slower, much slower, but still there. I sat with this for a long time in the empty laboratory. Robbie's sounds from the generator building, the occasional quiet voice from Garrett or Adkins at the perimeter, the jungle noise from outside, its constant complex layer. I put the files in the truck. At 2 in the afternoon, Robbie came out of the generator building and said, "Done." We drove the truck to a position about 50 meters from the facility, where there was a clear line of sight south. Robbie connected the cables he'd rigged from the transmitter to the truck's horn relay. He looked at me. "This is going to be loud," he said. "Yes. How far south do you want the draw?" "As far as it will carry." He threw the switch. The sound that came out of that transmitter was the truck horn, continuous, without pause, but amplified through equipment designed for long-range emergency broadcasting and directed through a proper antenna array. It was not just a truck horn. It was a signal that I felt in my teeth. We left the truck there, horn running, transmitter running, broadcasting continuously. We took the motorcycle, and we walked out on Garrett's track, and behind us, the sound pushed south through the jungle like a fist. On the way back to Kalan, Robbie riding ahead, Garrett and Adkins and I walking, we heard, and this is the thing I need you to understand happened, we heard the jungle change. The sounds of the birds and the insects and the frogs were still there, constant, but underneath them, from the south, from multiple directions simultaneously, we heard the sound of movement, large-scale movement, the sound of many things in the trees and on the ground, all moving in a specific direction, moving toward the signal. We walked fast. We made it back before dark. Dawson was on the wall when we came through the gate. She saw my face, and then she saw the bundle of files under my arm. "It worked?" she said. "It's running," I said. "As long as the battery backup holds, and Robbie thinks it'll hold for days, maybe weeks. That transmitter is pulling infected populations away from the main highway south of here. It won't get all of them, but it should divert enough of the main migration body to reduce the highway pressure significantly." She let out a breath that was not quite relief, but was the thing adjacent to it. The breath that people let out when a problem has gone from impossible to merely very hard. "And the files? I need to talk to your researcher, Peter Langhurst. Tonight? I'll get him. We talked for 4 hours, me and Langhurst and Dawson, in the command room, with the files spread on the table, and Langhurst reading with the speed of someone who understood what he was looking at. He was quiet for long stretches, and then would say something technical that I partially understood, and then be quiet again. He made notes. He cross-referenced things in his own files on his tablet. At the end of 4 hours, he leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "The degradation rate," he said. "Yes. If the field notes are accurate, and I have no way to verify this fully without a laboratory, if they're accurate, we are looking at a self-limiting phenomenon. The infected populations will diminish over time. Not quickly. Months. Maybe years in the worst cases. But the active period for any given infected individual or animal is not indefinite. So they die. They're not." He organized his thoughts. "The process that creates the infected state also degrades the host. It's destructive at the cellular level. Eventually, the host ceases to function. That's why the cycles in the wild animal populations resolved. The outbreak moved through the population and burned out." "How long?" I said. "In humans. The notes suggest 6 to 18 months for full degradation in human subjects." He paused. "This is preliminary data from early observations. I would be cautious about treating it as definitive. But there's a timeline. There's a potential timeline." I looked at Dawson. She was looking at the map on the wall with an expression I couldn't fully read. 6 to 18 months. In 6 to 18 months, if the notes were right, the infected would simply stop, the wave burning through, and then what was left was us. It wasn't hope, exactly. It was too qualified, too full of ifs and maybes, to be hope, but it was something, a shape where before there had been no shape. I went back to the dormitory. Dale was awake. He was reading, or trying to, a book he'd found in the center's small library, some kind of nature guide, because of course it was. "Well?" he said. I sat on the bunk opposite his. "There's a timeline," I said. His face did something, a very small thing, a very controlled thing. "What kind of timeline?" "Months, maybe over a year, but a timeline." I told him what Langhurst had said. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he was quiet for a long time. 6 to 18 months, he said. "Best case. If the notes are right. That's a long time." "Yes. But it ends." I looked at him. "It ends." He nodded slowly, looking at his book. Then he looked up, and there was something on his face that was almost Dale. The ordinary Dale. The Dale who bought a bird book and identified kingfishers on slow mornings. "There was a purple sunbird on the center's garden fence this morning," he said. I looked it up in the guide. Unmistakable when you know what to look for. "Is that so?" "Brilliant purple on the throat. You'd know it if you saw one." I lay back on my bunk and looked at the ceiling. "Dale." "Yeah." "You're not turning." A long pause. "No," he said. "I don't think I am. Peggy's going to clear you tomorrow. Probably. Then after that, you're back on duty. Full partner." "Copy that." I closed my eyes. The center was quiet in its nighttime way. The generator running, the distant sound of the guard rotation on the wall, a child somewhere having a bad dream and being murmured back to calm. Life sounds. The sounds of people still going. Outside the walls, the jungle. And somewhere in the jungle, the transmitter still broadcasting, still pulling the infected population south and east, away from the roads north. Buying time. Buying the months we needed. The next 2 weeks were work. That's the simplest way I can describe them. We had a settlement to build, a security system to establish, a supply network to organize, people to integrate and organize, and keep from falling apart. Dawson handled the military structure. Helen handled the center's operations. I slotted in somewhere between them, handling what I'd always handled, reading a situation, making a call, moving forward. We expanded the walls using timber from the center's agricultural outbuildings. We established clear watch schedules and didn't let them slip. We fortified the vehicle bay so that the truck fleet was protected and could be deployed quickly. We built what Dawson called a proper comms setup and what I called Dale's project. because Dale turned out to be the person who understood radio better than anyone at the center, and he spent 4 days building a proper antenna array on the center's main building roof that improved our transmission range by a factor that I'm not qualified to quantify, but that Dawson said was significant. Robbie organized the mechanics. 3 people at the center had vehicle maintenance experience, and he brought them together and established a maintenance rotation and a fuel budget that meant we always knew exactly what we had and always had a plan for what we'd use it on. Garrett did something unexpected. He went to the fence every morning, as he always had, and he did his perimeter walk, as he always had. But he also started talking to the teenagers at the center. There were 11 of them, about the forest. He wasn't teaching them anything formal. He'd just stand at the fence and talk about what he was seeing, and eventually some of them started following him. What the tracks meant, what the bird sounds indicated, how you read the forest's mood by the changes in sound and movement. Things his grandmother had taught him, he said once, when I asked about it. Things you lose when nobody passes them on. I thought about the bird book in Dale's pocket. Peggy established a proper medical station. She did it with the same quiet competence she did everything, and within 10 days, she had a small team of people with various relevant skills. There was a retired doctor in the center's population who'd been hiding his anxiety disorder by focusing entirely on his patients, who were capable of managing the center's health needs with reasonable competence. The migration wave hit the highway south of us, 8 days after we arrived at Kellan. The transmitter had done exactly what we'd hoped, pulled a significant portion of the migration body east, off the main highway, into the jungle, where the terrain and the distance from population centers would slow and scatter it. What remained on the highway was still substantial. Thousands of infected moving north on the main road, slower than they'd been in the city, because the road was clogged with abandoned vehicles, and the group was large enough that the edges were being dragged off into the terrain and not coming back. But the highway junction south of Kellan was 4 kilometers from the center, and between the junction and the center, we had a system. Dawson's soldiers and the acoustic lures we'd built, portable transmitters, smaller versions of the mining camp transmitter, which Robbie had figured out how to build from components at the center's agricultural electronics workshop, positioned along the side roads east and west of the highway junction, drawing the infectious wave off the main road in multiple directions simultaneously. It wasn't perfect. 2 groups broke through to within a kilometer of the center's walls on the 2nd day of the migration. The wall held. The guards held. We lost nobody. On the 3rd day, the main body passed. Moved north. Followed the sound of a transmitter someone had positioned 8 kilometers up the highway from a passing vehicle. Pulled away. The road south of us was silent by the 5th day. Not empty. There were still individuals, small groups, stragglers. There would be for a long time. The migration wasn't a single event. It was a pulse. And after the main body came the trailing edge. And the trailing edge was in some ways more dangerous, because it was unpredictable, in the way that individual things are more unpredictable than masses. But the critical moment had passed. I'm telling you this in order, but I should be clear that none of it felt orderly when it was happening. It felt like standing in a current that was too strong to fight, and trying to angle yourself so that it pushed you in a useful direction rather than drowning you. You make the decisions you can make. You let go of the decisions you can't. You check on the people who need checking on, and you try not to carry too much of what you couldn't control. I went to the wall every evening. I looked at the forest. I listened. The jungle sounds were changing. Slowly, incrementally, but changing. The sounds that had been wrong, the pacing, the continuous vocalization from the wrong things, were less frequent, more of the normal sounds. Birds I hadn't heard in days. The kind of nighttime chorus that meant the animals who stayed out of sight during the worst of it were starting to come back. Langhurst told me on day 12 that he'd received transmission from a university research station on the coast, not compromised, running on generator power, maintaining contact with the outside world, and that there was preliminary confirmation of his degradation theory from another researcher who'd been studying the phenomenon in an animal population. Earlier degradation than even the field notes suggested in some cases. It's going to be uneven, he said. Some populations will resolve faster. Some will persist. You shouldn't expect a single end date. I don't expect anything, I told him. I just expected there to be something to survive for. On day 15, we re-established contact with the farmhouse family, Paul Reinhardt and his family, 12 kilometers north. They'd been struggling with a fence breach, and we sent a team out on the trucks to help them reinforce it. They were okay. They came back to the center with us. On day 17, I led a team back through the forest to the ranger station to retrieve what we'd left behind and to confirm the station was still secure. We found it intact. The fence held. The supplies we'd been unable to take were undisturbed. We found also, near the observation tower, a set of tracks. Human tracks, not infected. Someone had been there since we left. I followed the tracks. They led to the storage shed, which had been opened, not forced. Opened with knowledge of the latch, the non-obvious latch that you had to know about. Inside, food had been taken, just food, a blanket, a water container. On the wall of the shed, written in marker pen, the same kind Nate used for his supply labels, I was here, KB, 21. KB, Keith Burrows, Station 7. Nate's ranger friend, who'd walked northwest from his station 12 days ago, and who we'd assumed was dead. I showed it to Nate. He stood at the shed door and looked at the writing for a long time without speaking. He was here, Nate said finally, recently, within the last few days. He came back to the station. He found it empty, took what he needed, and kept going. Northwest, Nate said. He would have eventually hit the highway, if the highway was clear. He might be at Kellon, I said. He might have come in before us, or come in after. Nate looked at me with something uncertain in his face. Not quite hope, not quite fear. When we got back to Kellon that evening, I went to find Helen, who maintained the intake records. A man named Keith Burrows, I said. Did he come through? She looked through her records, shook her head. No one by that name. Have you had anyone come in unregistered? Anyone who didn't give a name? She thought about it. About 10 days ago, a man, alone, came in from the north gate. He was in poor shape, dehydrated, some injuries, wouldn't talk much. He gave his name as just Keith. He's in the medical wing. Peggy's been treating him. 4. I went to the medical wing. The man in the bed was lean, too lean, with the look of someone who'd been moving hard through rough country for days on limited food. He had a bandaged arm, and the specific exhaustion of someone who'd used up most of what they had. He was awake when I came in, looking at the ceiling. He was Nate's age, roughly. He had the same weathered quality. He turned his head when I came in and looked at me with careful eyes. Keith Burrows, I said. A long moment. Who are you? Owen Pratt. I found your note. He looked at me steadily. Then, is Nathan here? He is. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, something in his face had come slightly unclenched. Good, he said. That's good. I went to get Nate. I didn't stay for the reunion. Some moments are not for observers. On day 21, I stood at the radio in the center's command room, and I broadcast on multiple channels the message I'd been preparing to any survivor or group listening on emergency channels in the northern region. This is Officer Owen Pratt, broadcasting from the Kellon Agricultural Training Center. We have a secured perimeter, an operational settlement of 86 people, medical facilities, food stores, and power. We are in contact with military authority and with survivor groups in the area. If you are isolated and seeking contact or assistance, please respond on this channel. We have vehicles and a team capable of operating in the forest. You are not alone. This message will repeat. I repeated it 4 times, and then I left the channel open and monitored. The first response came 3 hours later. A woman, calm voice, speaking from somewhere west. A group of 11, at a school building, 3 weeks in, running low on food. She'd been trying to raise anyone for 10 days. Second response, the next day. A man, less calm, clearly under strain, at a gas station 40 kilometers southeast. He was alone, but he had something worth knowing about. The highway south of him, he reported, had been clear for 6 days. Infected passing through had thinned dramatically in the last week. Third response on day 23. A group of 32 at a community hall 20 kilometers north. Solid structure, not running out of supplies yet, but they had a medical situation they couldn't handle alone, and they had 3 vehicles and a team willing to move if we gave them a direction. 32. 11. 1. 86 of us. 130 people in a network that hadn't existed 3 weeks ago. Dawson came to stand beside me at the radio on the afternoon of day 23, after the third response, and we were both quiet for a moment. "You're building something," she said. "We're building something. There's a difference." "Not really," I said. "Not the way I see it." She looked at the map on the wall, now covered with the new contact markers I'd been adding in blue. "What do you want to call it?" "The network." I thought about it. I thought about Checkpoint Juliet 7, which I'd left behind, and the cracked concrete and the faded yellow stencil, and Ferris's hand above the crowd of them, and the kingfisher that Dale heard that last ordinary morning. "Nothing yet," I said. "Let it be real first. Then we name it. I want to tell you where we are now. I want to give you the current state of things, because if you're listening to this, and I still don't know if anyone is, but I have to proceed as if someone is, because the alternative is not something I can afford to think about. You should know what we have, and what we're working with. It's been 31 days since Checkpoint Juliet 7. 31 days since the white sedan came around that bend, and the man inside had a cut above his eyebrow, and shaking hands, and told me there were things on the road behind him. The settlement at Kellen has 92 people now, with more expected from the network contacts. We have a working perimeter, reliable food and water, power, medical care, and communications. We have plans, actual plans, not just the next 12 hours plans I was making in week 1, but longer-range plans about food production and infrastructure, and how to extend the network outward. Dale is clear, fully cleared by Peggy 2 weeks ago. His wound healed completely. He had a week of fatigue around day 10 that we were all watching very closely, and then it passed and he was fine. He is operational. He is on the radio team and he keeps Dale's notebook in his breast pocket, which he says is a habit he's keeping. He added a bee eater to the notebook on day 18, green and orange. He showed me, just briefly. He was not making a big deal about it. Robbie is running the vehicle and communications equipment maintenance. He has a team of 4 now. He has also, without announcing it, begun teaching one of the teenagers mechanical skills in the evenings. The teenager's name is Paul Reinhardt's oldest son, and he follows Robbie around the vehicle bay, the way Robbie himself must have followed someone once. Garrett does the perimeter walks and the forest observation, and the teaching. The forest is getting quieter in the wrong ways. Fewer infected sounds, fewer wrong animal sounds. He doesn't say this means anything definitive. He just notes it and adds it to what we know. Nate is our head of forest operations, which is a title I made up, but which fits exactly what he does. He and Keith Burrows, who took 3 weeks to recover properly, have between them a complete understanding of the forestry grid within a 50-kilometer radius of Kellen. This is a resource that is hard to overstate. Peggy is running the medical station. She has the retired doctor and 2 nurses and 1 person with veterinary training, which has turned out to be relevant in ways I did not initially anticipate. She is, quietly, the person who is keeping the most people whole. The transmitter at the mining camp is still broadcasting. Robbie says the battery backup should hold another 3 to 4 weeks, and after that, we'll need to decide whether to maintain it or let it go. By then, we hope the migration event will have run its course sufficiently that the acoustic draw is less critical. The highway south is cleaner each day. Not empty. It will be a long time before anything is empty in any real sense, but cleaner. The degradation is happening, slowly, unevenly, as Langhurst said it would, but happening. There's a lot I still don't know. I don't know what happened to Ferris, really. I don't know how many people on that road got through, and how many didn't. I don't know what the world looks like beyond the radius of what we can see and hear. I don't know if what Langhurst read in those field notes is accurate enough to trust, or if we're working with a partial picture that will surprise us later. I know that the network works. I know that the people in this settlement are functional and organized, and are solving problems. I know that when I walk through the compound, I see people doing things, not just surviving, doing things, building things, planning things. I know that the morning after the migration wave passed, I heard birds from the wall, proper birds, multiple species, from the direction of the forest. I know that Dale identified a racket-tailed drongo from the center's garden yesterday. He mentioned it the way he always mentions these things, sideways, briefly, not making a production of it. I know that the jungle has its own timeline, its own logic, that predates everything we did and will outlast most of it. I know that you can be inside it and learn it well enough to stay alive, but you don't ever control it. I know that if you are listening to this, somewhere, on whatever channel this is reaching, then you have survived this far, and that's enough to work with. This is Officer Owen Pratt, settlement at Kellen Agricultural Training Center. We are on multiple emergency channels. We will be monitoring and broadcasting daily. If you can hear this, respond. If you can't respond, then just keep going. Keep going until you can. We'll be here. One more thing. I want to tell you one more thing. On the morning of day 20, 2 hours before first light, I was on the wall for the early watch. It was quiet. The kind of quiet that was starting to feel less wrong, and more like the quiet that belongs here. The sky over the forest was that deep blue that happens just before dawn. Not black anymore, but not day yet. Something moved in the trees at the edge of the lights. I went still, put my hand on my sidearm, watched. An animal came out of the tree line. A large one, slow, moving with normal animal caution, stopping, checking, moving again. A sambar deer, I think. Big, darker in the dim light. It walked into the open area between the tree line and the wall, and it stopped there, and looked at the wall, and looked at me. It was not infected. I could tell from 20 meters. The movement was right. The head carriage was right. The eyes, I could see the eyes in the pre-dawn light, were the eyes of an animal that was cautious and alive, not the blank forward-facing thing I'd seen in the infected. It looked at me for a long moment. Then it looked at the forest. Then it walked back to the tree line and was gone. I stood on the wall for a while after. I thought, the forest isn't lost. The jungle isn't gone. Whatever is in it, in the soil and the water, in the cycles that nobody studied carefully enough until too late. It belongs to this place in a way that what we brought here doesn't. It will still be here after. And we can still be here after. That's the thing. That's the thing I want you to hear, whoever you are. We can still be here after. Owen Pratt. End of log. Day 31. Channel 3. Emergency frequency. Northern region.